Chapter 706. Guazi was already as slow as a tortoise when he reached the end of the run. He was panting like a cow, and his legs were as heavy as lead. Every step he took was extremely heavy. However, he still managed to display an astonishing amount of perseverance and persevered until the last second of the 30 minutes. It was only when Ding Xiang shouted for him to stop that his limbs went soft. He lowered his head and wanted to collapse onto the stone chair beside him. At this moment he wanted to complain, but he didn't even have the strength to speak. There was only a stop signal in his head. You can't sit down. You have to walk slowly and recover. Ding Xiang hurriedly pulled Guazi. Sitting down immediately after running would hinder the blood flow of the lower limbs and affect blood circulation. This was very harmful to the body. However, in order to support this heavy body, Ding Xiang hugged Guazi's arm. Fortunately, she was also a girl who was born with great strength. Her small body contained a lot of energy. Guazi's weight of more than 190 pounds, he had already lost a lot of weight from the previous 200 pounds, was actually supported by Ding Xiang. With Ding Xiang's support, Guazi walked 2 steps weakly. His panting gradually found a rhythm. As he panted, he said weakly, "Sigh, I'm so tired. I can't run anymore." This guy was also the son of an official and a rich man. Although he wasn't as bad as those people, he wasn't someone who could bear hardships and endure hardships. Whenever he had an opportunity, he would complain like a child. Fortunately, Ding Xiang was patient and didn't throw him down. She even coaxed him like a child. Okay, we won't run today. Walk for a while, and we'll take a taxi back. You've already performed very well today. Persevere until the end and continue to work hard. You'll definitely be able to slim down." As they walked, Guazi's brain gradually regained a bit of consciousness. However, he gradually stopped talking. His cheeks were burning and seemed to have turned red. There was a warm current surging in his heart. Of course, Ding Xiang couldn't find Guazi's strangeness in the middle of the night. Even if she saw Guazi blushing, because Guazi had just finished running, she wouldn't feel strange. Guazi was the only one who noticed it. His arm was in Ding Xiang's embrace, and he was pressing against Ding Xiang's chest. The two mounds were separated by layers of clothing, and through the pressure of his arm, the soft feeling was transmitted into his mind. It was the first time he had been in such close contact with a woman. Guazi couldn't help but feel a little thirsty and flushed. However, he didn't dare to say it out loud. There were also some messy thoughts in his mind that he couldn't bear to say. However, this situation did not last long. Ding Xiang discovered it herself. She thought that Guazi was still tired and did not notice it. In a panic, she chose to secretly change the position of supporting Guazi to reduce the ambiguous contact. Regarding this, Ding Xiang felt very embarrassed, as if she had done something wrong. After Ding Xiang separated from him for a while, Guazi actually felt a little lost. However, the turmoil in his heart from earlier actually helped him recover some of his energy. After walking for a while, Guazi was embarrassed to let Ding Xiang support him so hard. The two of them walked slowly and rested side by side. Along the way, the two of them had a tacit understanding and didn't speak much. They just walked side by the side of the Wusong River like the other couples on the jogging route, looking at the night scenery by the river that was like fireworks. Under this somewhat romantic scenery, Guazi didn't realize that a trace of affection had quietly grown. "All right, before class ends, I'll ask you a fun question, okay?" Teacher Mu looked at the children from the podium with a smile. "Okay." She and the other children responded happily and enthusiastically. "Right now we have 7 little lambs playing hide and seek. We have already found 3 of them. How many more have we not found?" Teacher Mu asked the question as he drew 7 little lambs on the blackboard. This question was very interesting, and the children all gave their own answers at the same time. However, this time, Teacher Mu asked Nan Jiaoyu to come up and answer with the teacher. She put down her little hand regretfully. However, the little girl still looked at the teacher attentively. She longed for more knowledge and to broaden her thinking under the teacher's guidance. Nan Jiaoyu was actually very smart. Not only did the little boy know how to recite poems, but he was also taught by an old father. He had already been arranged to learn a lot of primary school knowledge, especially when there were many math problems that children didn't know how to do. He could quickly solve them. After Nan Xiaoyu stood up, he puffed out his chest and raised his head. His voice wasn't loud, but he said confidently, "Teacher, I know. There are 4 little lambs. 7 minus 3 equals 4. Nan Xiaoyu is so awesome." Lu Weisha didn't have much talent in math. She stood beside Xixi and muttered enviously. Xixi was slower than Nan Xiaoyu. However, she also admired Nan Xiaoyu, so she nodded at Lu Weisha. However, Teacher Mu's question wasn't just a simple math problem. It was also a brain-teaser question. Teacher Mu pointed at the blackboard and circled 3 little lambs with a piece of chalk. Then he circled another little lamb and explained to the children. Finally, the children understood that the 7 little lambs were playing hide-and-seek. This meant that one of the lambs was responsible for finding them. Then it found 3 lambs, so there were only 3 left. So that's how it is. Xixi felt that it was extremely fun. The little girl couldn't help but twist in her chair. After class, Xixi, who was chatting and playing with her little friends, suddenly remembered something. The little girl left her little friends and ran to the teacher's side. She tugged at Teacher Mu's clothes, raised her little head and shouted, Teacher Mu, what's wrong? Yangshi." Teacher Mu squatted down and asked gently, Teacher Mu, can I borrow your blackboard? Xixi's big eyes were filled with pious expectation. Sure. However, teacher, can I ask why you want to borrow teacher's blackboard? Teacher Mu asked with a smile. I want to bring the blackboard home, but the big blackboard is too heavy. I can't carry it. My papa is very strong. I asked my papa to bring it home. The little girl was very happy to get Teacher Mu's approval. She tried her best to describe her idea to Teacher Mu. Are you going to take it home to draw? Teacher Mu couldn't help but ask. He not drawing. I'm drawing on paper. My papa is also drawing on paper. Xixi shook her little head and said happily, Mom asked me to teach my little brother, so I want the big blackboard. Finally, they got to the point. Teacher Mu smiled and said, So you want to teach your little brother, so you want to write on the blackboard like a teacher to teach your little brother, right? Xixi nodded vigorously. Yes. Teacher Mu was about to praise Xixi for being sensible, but on second thought, there seemed to be something wrong. Didn't Yang Yi's family have their second child born at the end of last year? Chapter 707. In the afternoon, Yang Yi went to the kindergarten to pick up Xixi. When the little girl saw her father coming in, she happily pulled her father to the corner of the classroom. She pointed to the blackboard on the side and said to her father, Papa, take this home. At that time, Yang Yi was a little confused. Why did he have to take away the teacher's teaching materials? Teacher Mu followed them. She explained to Yang Yi about Xixi's request today and said with a smile, I thought Xixi was referring to a relative's child, but after asking her, it didn't seem to be the case. So Xixi wants to teach a child who is only a few months old? Xixi was listening to Teacher Mu's words. She blinked her eyes in confusion and said, A little brother is a little brother. So that's how it is. Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He explained to Teacher Mu. The day before yesterday, her mother joked that she should study hard and teach her little brother when she learned something. We didn't expect her to take it seriously. Xixi didn't mention this request yesterday, because Teacher Mu didn't teach the children yesterday. It was Teacher Shun who taught the children English and Teacher Kai who taught them to draw. So Xixi forgot about it. The little girl didn't think that her idea was cute. Instead, she said happily, Papa, I'm sister's teacher. Seeing this beautiful and obedient little girl happy, Teacher Mu was reluctant to expose her. So I agreed to lend it to her. But Xixi, you have to return it to me tomorrow. Teacher Mu said with a smile. Otherwise, I won't be able to teach you. The little girl obediently stood beside her father and nodded. Teacher Mu, I won't take your blackboard back. Yang Yi said, which surprised Teacher Mu. Xixi also anxiously frowned her beautiful little eyebrows. However, Yang Yi didn't want to use the kindergarten's blackboard because he wanted to dampen Xixi's enthusiasm. Before his daughter could question him anxiously, Yang Yi patted her little head and said with a smile, Xixi, since you want a blackboard, Daddy will take you to buy a more interesting one, okay? She was pleasantly surprised. She took her father's hand and asked expectantly, "Really? Papa, what's a more fun blackboard?" The more fun blackboard is that you can hold it in your hand and scribble on it casually with a pen. Then, there's something below that you can pull to erase the writing on it. It's as if it's turned white. Then, you can write again without dirtying your hands. Yang Yi nodded gratefully to Teacher Mu. Then he took Shishi's little hand and led her out. He was talking about a magnetic drawing board. When painting, fine magnetic powder was sucked up by a magnetic pen, and the effect of electrostatic force would make the fine magnetic powder stay on the grid behind the drawing board. The principle of erasing was the same as the principle of painting. Haha, it's so fun. The little girl was very interested in her father's description. She walked beside her father with a small school bag and said, "Then Papa, let's go and buy it." "Okay, let's go home after we buy it," Yang Yi said with a smile. The laughter of the father and daughter echoed softly in the corridor. Obviously, Yang Yi didn't intend to correct Shishi's wrong judgment, nor did he intend to tell Shishi, "Tong Tong is so young that he can't understand what you are saying to him." Besides, it was obvious that Cece was treating this so-called class as a game. Usually when she played house with Lan Xian, those little dolls wouldn't move or speak, right? Since Shishi was so interested in it, as long as it was not something bad, Yang Yi was willing to let her try and explore the beauty of this world. Jin Yuan, an ordinary enterprise employee in Jiang City, usually liked to watch movies and TV. He could be regarded as a fan of Dan Hongkue, but he was not the kind of fan who chased after stars. He liked Dan Hongkue. On one hand, Dan Hongkue's roles were very successful and memorable. On the other hand, it was also because Dan Hongkue was picky about the script and not the role. Even if he acted in a supporting role, the plot was quite outstanding. At least, it was a carefully conceived script, not a commercial blockbuster. However, he turned on the TV tonight to watch the variety show The Limit Challenge that Dan Hongkue took part in. Why would such a man who was focused on the film industry participate in a variety show? Jin Yuan was very curious. He didn't pay attention to the rumors that The Limit Challenge plagiarized the High Energy Challenge. He simply wanted to know what kind of charm this show had to be able to invite big shots like Dan Hongkue, Jie Yuchen, and Yuan Yan. Jin Yuan had also seen a report saying that China Star Productions had spent more than 50 million to hire these hosts. Dan Hongkue's net worth was the highest. After all, he was a super movie king. It was said that his remuneration alone was as high as 20 million. Jie Yuchen's remuneration was also around 18 million. Yuan Yan's was slightly less, 15 million. It had to be mentioned that although this news was not complete, it was very close to the real data. If the first season was like this, the second season would be even better. But from Jin Yuan's point of view, although money was indispensable, money alone was not enough to invite these three big shots who cherished their reputation. There must be something special about the ultimate challenge. This was the answer Jin Yuan wanted to find out when he turned on the TV today. "I want a life in full bloom, like flying in the vast sky, like walking through the boundless wilderness." It wasn't 10 o'clock yet, and between the commercials of the TV program, there was a program preview. Every time Jin Yuan heard Dan Hongkue and the others sing this song, he felt his blood boil, and the curiosity in his heart increased by a point. Finally, the show was broadcast. At the start, the director brought the cameraman into a girl's hotel room, and even took pictures of her sleeping posture. This made Jin Yuan's jaw drop. However, very soon, Yang Huan threw a pillow at the cameraman. Her fierce reaction and nimble skills left a deep impression on everyone. It wasn't that no one knew who Yang Huan was. There were already rumors that Yang Huan was Yang Yi's sister. However, today's show was destined to make people remember this girl who wasn't spoiled, but was even a little wild. Of course, at the start, Jin Yuan and the rest of the audience didn't understand what the show was doing. Why were they filming the members waking each other up one after another? However, very soon the fast-paced The Limit Challenge entered a time race. Jin Yuan finally saw a real reality show. There were only rules and no script. It was like playing a game, where the members had to fight on their own. No one knew who would win or lose until the very last moment. Jin Yuan was gradually mesmerized by the show. He even forgot that he was only there for Dan Hongkue. Dan Hongkue, who was humorous and had a lot of tricks when talking to others, was interesting. However, the other members had their own unique charm. The cunning and astute divine mathematician Yuan Yan's ability to calculate was truly breathtaking. Jie Yuchen loved to show off. Under his mature appearance, he hid a funny heart. When he was pleased with himself, there would always be some farce. Zhu Jie was silly, but he knew the tricks of variety shows. He was funny and had a good attitude. Even though he was treated like a pig by Jie Yuchen, he still joked with Jie Yuchen. The two of them were like football commentators when they talked about the fight between Yuan Yan and Yang Huan, which made Jin Yuan and the rest of the audience laugh. Yang Huan overturned Jin Yuan's understanding of women. She had great skills and was even more hardworking than the male members. With her around, it was like a unique and beautiful scenery on the TV screen. A girl like her might not be the best choice for a girlfriend or wife. She was valiant and had a good figure. She was very popular with men. Guozi was the member that surprised Jin Yuan the most. At first, he didn't think highly of Guozi. He thought that his chubby body would be a burden to the 6 members of the Limit Challenge. But gradually, Jin Yuan was convinced by Guozi's terrifying IQ. He realized that this little fatty was the only one other than Dan Hongkue who could compete with the clairvoyant. Even though Dan Hongkue was cunning, his prediction abilities were far from the clairvoyant's, but the little fatty could, especially after the start of the second phase. Yang Huan and Dan Hongkue became the main force and went out to find the mission target. Guozi also went out to find the mission target, but he was more of a backup role. With the help of the latter, Guozi counted the information that Yang Huan and Dan Hongkue sent him. It was like a map had appeared in his mind. He didn't need to write anything down. He described the distribution of every point with his mouth, and helped Yang Huan and Dan Hongkue organize the order of attack. This miraculous performance made Jin Yuan dumbfounded. Who the hell is this guy? With this IQ he couldn't be acting, right? Jin Yuan didn't think that Guozi was acting, so he continued to watch. Jin Yuan, who was already addicted to the variety show, suddenly felt that Yang Huan's team was invincible. Why did he say that? Compared to Yuan Yan, Guozi only lacked rich life experience. As for Dan Hongkue, compared to Yuan Yan, he lacked some calculation ability. When Guozi and Dan Hongkue were together, they were a strengthened version of Yuan Yan. They had Yang Huan, who was the best among the 6, and Yuan Yan had to bring along 2 people who were enthusiastic about the competition, but often made a fool of themselves on paper. Yang Huan's team should be able to win the competition. The show entered the commercial break, but Jin Yuan couldn't wait for it to end. He felt that the show wasn't any worse than those high IQ crime movies. It was so exciting. There were many audience members who had the same thoughts as Jin Yuan. However, there was someone who didn't think so. He was about to vomit blood. Chapter 708. In fact, as early as the beginning of the month when the Limit Challenge leaked some photos taken by passers-by, the people from Xingyao Productions understood that the Limit Challenge could not possibly be a plagiarized version of the High Energy Challenge. Even the manager of Xingyao Productions, Luo Jinting, gave up on the idea of competing with China Star Productions. However, he was still more cunning and let people continue to hype up the news of the Limit Challenge plagiarizing the High Energy Challenge. After all, the celebrity lineup was there, and its popularity was high. The High Energy Challenge's ratings kept dropping, so it was good to ride on other people's popularity. However, Hu Xing still hoped that he would be lucky and did not give up. That night, Hu Xing hesitated for a long time. After pressing the buttons, he switched to Shanghai TV station to watch the Limit Challenge. However, when he saw the time chase battle start, Hu Xing knew that he had lost completely. Variety shows could be played like this. With the novel game mode and the celebrities' outstanding performances, Hu Xing was not an ignorant audience. He was an experienced variety show director in the industry. He could easily tell the difference between the Limit Challenge and High Energy Challenge. However, the more exciting the Limit Challenge was, the more depressed Hu Xing felt. This show was destined to break the current structure of television shows and refresh the audience and producers' understanding. However, he was so close to such an epic-making show, but now he was so far away from it. Hu Sheng thought of Ren Min, who used to be his assistant, who was now one of the executive directors of the Limit Challenge. Needless to say, she would also follow this show and her value and status would rise. As for himself, if he did not accept the offer from Xingyao Productions and stayed in China Star Productions, he would also receive such glory, right? No. He was one level higher than Ren Min. He and Yen Tao should be the executive director. It would not be Ren Min's turn to show off. Yes, show off. Ren Min and his old colleagues who looked at him strangely when he left. While they were excited, they were probably celebrating and mocking him for being short-sighted, right? Hu Sheng really wanted to vomit blood when he thought of this. Yang Yi and Murphy were also watching the premiere of the Limit Challenge. That night, although Yang Yi bought the magnetic sketchpad for Shishi, Shishi did not rush to teach her brother as she had said. The little girl had a strong interest in the magnetic drawing board and the magnetic brush. A magnetic paintbrush that was neither a crayon nor a colored pen could not write anywhere else, but it could actually write on a magnetic drawing board. Moreover, the thing below that could erase all traces with a pull was even more amazing. After Shishi came back, she was addicted to playing with the drawing board and drawing with great interest. Yang Yi didn't understand why Shishi's interest in drawing with the magnetic drawing board was several times greater than usual. Anyway, the little girl played until 9 o'clock until she was tired and went to bed. She didn't even have time to teach her brother. Now that the two little ones were asleep, the two older ones were still watching TV. Murphy was even more engrossed in the show than Yang Yi. She snuggled into the crook of Yang Yi's arm and stared intently at the television. In the middle of the commercial, she couldn't help but ask Yang Yi, who won in the end? Did Huan's team win in the end? Like Jin Yuan, Murphy also felt that Yang Huan's team should win, perhaps because the editing of the show showed that Yang Huan's team had a great advantage. However, as the show went on, the rhythm of the camera switching and the intensity of the plot became more and more heartbreaking. Yang Yi smiled mysteriously and said, "Spoilers are not fun. You will know when you continue watching." "Hey you." Mo Fei patted Yang Yi's shoulder reproachfully, but the commercial was over and the show continued, so Mo Fei quickly turned her head away. The final result was really a big reversal. Guozi had calculated very accurately. The three of them had enough time and survived to the end. Moreover, he had used the card that reduced the time of one of the opponents. Yuan Yan, who had calculated well, had to give up Jie Yuchen, who had the least time and was the furthest away, and give time to Zhu Jie, who was the closest to the last task point. However, Guozi and Dan Hongkui did not expect that the program team had set a trap at the last task point. They needed everyone to gather at the final battle stage before they could press the last button. Yang Huan had the best stamina. Guozi had asked Yang Huan to deal with the second last task. However, before Yang Huan could come back, she found that she could not deal with the second task. Yuan Yan and Zhu Jie, who were guarding the last task point, rushed out. Not counting Jie Yuchen, Yuan Yan's team was all together. In the end, Yuan Yan, who did not expect to make a comeback, pressed the last button before Yang Huan and won the final victory. Mo Fei was speechless. She was supporting her sister-in-law. "Can't you let Huan win once?" Murphy said to Yang Yi, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Huan is so miserable. She worked so hard, but she did not win even once. She was also referring to the episode that Yang Yi and the others had recorded in Gusu City last Saturday. This is the charm of this program. Yang Yi smiled. We can't control the plot. We can only let the members express themselves freely. That's why they're doing their best to win. That's why the show is realistic and exciting. Furthermore, every episode has different expectations. This is something that can't be written in a script. What about Huan in the future? Will she keep losing? Teacher Yuan and Brother Dan are too cunning. Huan is not as scheming as them. Murphy said worriedly. When we were recording last week, Zhu Jie told me that it doesn't matter if she wins or not. The most important thing is to appear on screen. Yang Yi said. Although Huan may not win the challenge, it doesn't mean that she can't win either. As long as she keeps performing like this, the audience will still like her. Believe me, No one will lose in this program. When Yang Yi and Murphy were discussing the plot of the episode that had just finished, Yun Yangfeng, who was guarding Magic City TV station, called Yang Yi excitedly. How much? Calm down, tell me slowly. Yang Yi said with a smile. 208. The peak viewership reached 208. Yin Yangfeng repeated. What kind of result is this? Yang Yi did not quite understand. Director Yang, congratulations. Your first episode has broken the viewership record of Magic City Satellite TV's Wednesday at 10 p.m. variety show. Cui Jilin snatched the phone from Yin Yangfeng and said with a laugh. Vice President Cui was also very concerned about the viewership of this program. After all, she had tried her best to introduce this program. She would be able to benefit from its success too. Yin Yangfeng's excitement did not stop there. He remembered that the president had promised that as long as the Limit Challenge broke the record, the next season of the Limit Challenge would be broadcasted during prime time. Although China Star Productions had sold 2 of their ace programs, they had created a new gold mine for themselves. Chapter 709. Viewership ratings were one of the criteria for the producers to measure their success. Of course, the most important criteria was the reputation of the audience. Yang Yi and the others did not know about it in the middle of the night, but Mu Yuqing, who was far away in Yangcheng, felt it very deeply. Wednesday night was usually quite busy. Mu Yuqing was at a critical point in a project, and the entire department was working overtime. He only returned home after 10 p.m. Mu Yuqing did not want to watch TV at first. It was not complete anyway, so he might as well watch it or wait for the episode to be uploaded. However, he felt a little hungry after returning home so late, so he turned on the TV while eating instant noodles. He glanced at it a few times out of boredom, and went to take a shower after finishing his noodles. Who knew that after a few glances, he would dive right in and could not pull himself out. It's so exciting. Mu Yuqing could not help but sigh after watching it. It's really young Dada's creativity. It's like Prison Break, endless and unpredictable. Mu Yuqing felt that it was not enough and needed to share it with others. Therefore, he did not take a shower in the middle of the night. Instead, he took out his phone, logged into SNS, and opened the Yang Yi fan group that he often hung out with. Unexpectedly, many people in the group were discussing this show. Is it really that good? Most of the fans did not have the habit of watching TV. They were confused by the commotion and could not help but ask. It's good. I strongly recommend it to you. Mu Yuqing quickly answered a fan's question. Even Old Mu was exposed. Old Mu, did you watch it too? The messages were flooding in quickly. I watched half of it. I worked overtime tonight and came home late, Mu Yuqing replied. Where should I start? Yuan Yin went to snatch Yang Huan's time. Then you have to watch the beginning. It's also very exciting. It's a pity to miss it. Many people expressed. The part where Jie Yuchen was ambushed at the pig farm was too funny. Old Mu, you definitely did not see it. Mu Yuqing quickly shouted. No spoilers. If you tell me, why should I watch it? My heart is itching from listening to you guys. Usually, I don't watch variety shows. A bookstore owner who was a fan of the book came out and said with a smile. Old Juan, it's okay if you don't watch variety shows. I don't watch variety shows either. But I think this The Limit Challenge is really unique. It's a celebrity reality show. It's really good. Mu Yuqing was very familiar with the other party and quickly typed a line of words. Of course, Mu Yuqing was still not satisfied. He continued to send messages. The program designed by Young Dada is indeed different. There's suspense, action, reasoning, scheming against each other, and stupid teammates trapping each other. It's almost as good as a blockbuster movie. Then I have to take a look. When will it be rebroadcast? Old One asked excitedly. Mu Yuqing didn't know about this, but soon, a fan who knew about it told them. It's going to be replayed at 2 p.m. tomorrow or on Saturday. You can watch it on demand on Tuka's video website. The next day, many media outlets began to write articles about the extreme challenge that had been broadcast the previous night. After all, there was a film emperor, a TV emperor, and a very popular teacher Yuan. This program had not even been broadcast yet, and the reporters were already thinking about it. Other than a few media outlets, most of the reports were praising the Extreme Challenge. The Extreme Challenge's first broadcast breaks a record. New reality show is well received. A new mode, the Extreme Challenge wins the High Energy Challenge. Shanghai TV stations bet succeeds. The Extreme Challenge may lead to a new trend in variety shows. Reality shows can be played like this? The Extreme Challenge's first broadcast is a hit. Dan Hongkue, Jie Yuchen, Yuan Yan, the three giants meet in a reality show. Of course, the traditional media's reports were all serious. The internet media's reports on the Extreme Challenge were more interesting. It was a battle of headlines. Other than Dan Hongkue, Jie Yuchen, Yuan Yan, and Zhu Jie, these are the two faces you need to know about the Extreme Challenge. What will happen when film emperor Dan Hongkue is pounced on by a young girl? With film emperor's acting skills, Jie Yuchen perfectly tricked Zhu Jie, but the genius fatty was set up by an old fox. Is it the distortion of human nature? Or the fall of morality? Getting to know Yang Huan again. Even film emperor is in awe. This kind of overwhelming coverage made the ultimate challenge completely popular. Even if it was a rerun on Thursday afternoon, many people still came over to watch it on their televisions after hearing about it. However, it was worth mentioning that the popularity of the show did not draw too much attention from the media behind the scenes. This was different from when Yang Yi's name was mentioned repeatedly during the preparation period. Now everyone was talking about the 6 members who performed very well in the show. Not only did Dan Hongkue, Jie Yuchen, Yuan Yan, and Zhu Jie receive a lot of attention, but Yang Huan and Guizi, who were previously unknown, also received a lot of praise from the media. Micro-broadcasting's fans skyrocketed overnight. On Thursday afternoon, in order to ride on this hot topic, some gossip media outlets actively dug up the video of Guizi's interview with Jiangnan TV 2 years ago. They revealed that Guizi was Jiangnan province's top scorer in science 2 years ago. Guizi had acted and sung in fairy tales, which was nothing new. However, this guy was actually the top scorer in the college entrance examination. Many of the audience members who had fallen in love with Guizi because of the limit challenge finally understood why Guizi had such a heaven-defying IQ. It turned out that the production team did not deliberately let Guizi act. A top scorer in the college entrance examination who was about 16 years old at that time had a very high IQ. This video also exposed Guizi's youthful frivolity. This guy was the top scorer in the college entrance examination. But not only did he not apply for Beihua University, which many candidates dreamed of, but he also applied for Jiangqing Media University, which had rejected him before. He even said it to the camera. Although Guizi in the video was a little arrogant, unexpectedly, this video did not have a negative impact on him. Instead, it made more people like Guizi. They liked this little fatty who was honest and persistent in pursuing his dreams. Do you look up at the moon, or do you lower your head and pick up a sixpence? Guizi gave up a bright future that many people could only dream of, and chose to pursue a vague dream. It had to be said that even if they felt it was a pity and did not think that this little fatty could become the best actor, Guizi's attitude was still worthy of respect and affection. Yang Huan also gained fans. Previously, Yang Huan was widely criticized for being Yang Yi's biological sister. Even though the crew of Drawing Sword had already proven her identity as an actress, she was still selected for the Extreme Challenge. She was even selected for the Drawing Sword crew and was widely criticized for her role as Xiuqin. Before the show was broadcast, many people scolded Yang Huan online, saying that she relied on her connections to get to where she was and looking down on her. In the film academy, Yang Huan also received strange looks from many of her classmates. Of course, there were also many people who wanted to get closer to Yang Yi by pursuing Yang Huan. Yang Huan was well aware of this and was not affected too much. However, the people of the Yang family were very strong and had a tenacity in their bones. Even if she was a girl, she was not willing to be crushed by the pressure easily. Even if Ding Xiang was not by her side to talk to, Yang Huan was still holding back her energy and wanted to break through the door to show those who looked down on her. However, she did not expect that after one episode, many people would change their view of Yang Huan. Even if they still labeled her as Yang Yi's sister, Yang Huan attracted a wave of fans with her valiant and heroic appearance, nimble skills, and brutal fighting spirit. Yang Huan's popularity was not obvious enough, but there were still some nosy reporters who used Yang Huan to cause trouble for Li Manman. Li Manman, who was about to get her hair done, was blocked by reporters outside her company. Li Manman, the netizens commented that you only know how to act coquettishly on variety shows, and are not as good as Yang Huan from The Extreme Challenge. What do you think? The reporter asked slyly. The Extreme Challenge again. Yang Huan again. Li Manman watched it last night, and was so envious that she could not sleep at night. They really touched the pot that did not boil. Li Manman was cursing in her heart, but she could only force a smile on her face. Every variety show has different requirements. I can only say that each variety show is wonderful in its own way. Li Manman, if you participated in the Extreme Challenge, would you do better than Yang Huan? Another reporter also dug a hole for Li Manman. This assumption is not valid. Why would the Extreme Challenge invite me? Don't you think so? Li Manman deliberately looked at the reporter with a reproachful look, which made the reporter's bones melt. However, the reporter next to them was secretly happy. He had already thought of how to write an eye-catching report for Li Manman's answer. The title would be Li Manman Hints. There's an inside story in selecting guests. Yang, you will not choose me. Chapter 710. After all, the magnetic sketchpad was not as fun as a real paintbrush. She played with the sketchpad for the whole night. Her interest in the sketchpad gradually died down. She finally remembered her little brother, whom she had forgotten all about. The next night, Miss Shishi was going to teach her little brother a lesson. Therefore, the whole family helped the little girl set up the classroom in the living room. Yang Yi turned off the TV and brought over a stool. He clipped the edge of the stool and made a simple stand for Shishi's magnetic sketchpad. Murphy took out yogurt and a box of pudding from the fridge. She was going to reward Shishi, who was going to finish her lesson later. However, Cece's interest at the moment was all focused on imitating Teacher Mu. She had no intention of eating. Mom, little brother has to sit up. The teacher said that we have to sit on the stool and listen in class. We can't be disobedient. Shishi pouted and pointed at Tong Tong, who was placed on the carpet by her mother. Tong Tong had no idea what was happening outside. It was his first time touching the carpet in the living room. Yang Yi cleaned it regularly, so it was not dirty. It was soft and comfortable. The little guy skillfully propped up half of his body and opened his head to explore the world. At this moment, Xiao Guai walked past them with his tail erect. Tong Tong's eyes were attracted by the fat blue creature. He grinned. Unfortunately, Tong Tong could only prop himself up, but could not crawl. He could only look at Xiao Guai, but could not play with him. Xiao Guai walked away leisurely. He did not know that he had just escaped a disaster. Little brother doesn't know how to sit. He's still young. Murphy said. Shishi was a little disappointed, but she did not dwell on it too much. After her father finished setting up, Miss Shishi's lesson began. Little brother, look here. As a teacher, Shishi was not very competent. She turned around to draw on the magnetic drawing board after saying that to her brother. She did not notice that Tong Tong was not looking at her at all. Murphy had no choice but to pick up Tong Tong and lay him down so that he could face his sister. However, Tong Tong's little head involuntarily turned away. His gaze was still following the cat, who jumped down from the cat tree and ran to the carpet to stretch. Meow. Dao Dao was much nicer to children. After noticing Tong Tong's gaze, she opened her eyes and looked into Tong Tong's eyes. She called out softly. Tong Tong was not afraid. He was very familiar with all the pets in the house. Hearing the cat's meow, the little guy even raised his little dimples and grinned. However, Duo only cried out once. The cold meow queen, Dao Dao, was not interested in playing with Tong Tong. She turned around and snuggled into Murphy's arms. This used to be Tong Tong's special spot. Now that it was empty, Dao Dao could rub herself in it. She even raised her little head and looked at the mistress, as if she was expecting something. Murphy scratched the back of Dao Dao's head. Dao Dao immediately felt so comfortable that she closed her eyes. Fortunately, little Sasaku wasn't left out. Steamed Bun, who was watching everything from the corner, saw an opportunity and ran over while wagging his tail. He went to Sasaka's side. Baozi liked Tong Tong very much. He had watched Tong Tong grow up. However, Tong Tong was usually in the arms of the big masters, so Baozi could not get close to him. Baozi, who was already more than a year old, was already a big dog. He was carefully taken care of by the Yang family. Baozi's slender legs, fluffy tail, strong body, and glossy yellow fur were as good-looking as those foreign dogs. Of course, Baozi had grown up, but he was still that timid and shy fellow. He ran to Tong Tong's side and wagged his tail. He did not know how to play with this little fellow. His gaze was evasive, as if he was very embarrassed. Tong Tong raised his head to look at Baozi. It was not clear whether he felt that it was too tiring, or that Baozi was playing with him. He barked twice excitedly. Baozi finally found a good solution. He lay down, put his head on his forelegs, and docilely stuck to Tong Tong. Unexpectedly, Tong Tong raised a trembling hand and placed it on Baozi's body. Then he laid his whole body on Baozi. Oh, this is much more comfortable. Tong Tong could use Baozi to support himself effortlessly. The little fellow immediately beamed with joy and enjoyed his new position. Baozi raised his eyes, but his personality was better than Meow Dodo's. He was not angry at all when Tong Tong laid on his body. He quietly supported his little master. Honey, look! Murphy saw this scene and was very happy. She could not help but share it with Yang Yi. Cece was drawing very seriously. She drew fat sheep with long horns one after another on the magnetic drawing board. They didn't look alike, but they looked very similar. The little girl didn't know that little Momo behind her wasn't paying attention to her, and was even playing with her. Finally, she finished drawing 7 sheep. Shishi looked at her drawing with satisfaction. Then, she turned around and said to Tong Tong, "Little brother, this is what my teacher told us. There are 7 sheep playing hide and seek. Then we found 3 sheep. How many sheep are missing?" However, Tong Tong did not look at his sister. "Momo, your sister is talking to you." Murphy was worried that Shishi would be embarrassed and unhappy. She carried Dodo to one side, and then picked up Tong Tong, who was lying on Baozi's body, and let him lie in her arms. Because she was facing her older sister, Xiao Nua finally looked at her older sister. Of course, the little boy couldn't answer the question. So Murphy played the role of the student for him. She shook the little boy's little hand with a smile and said, "Sister, if I don't understand it yet, can you tell me how to solve this problem?" "Haha, sure." Cece smiled happily. Being able to interact with someone was like playing house, and it became interesting. The little girl circled the 3 lambs and pointed at a lamb outside the circle. While trying to recall what Teacher Mu had taught her, she said without turning her head, "Actually, it's a lamb that's looking for someone. It found these 3 lambs, so there are only 3 left." Perhaps it was because the color of the magnetic drawing board was not good, but Tong Tong was not interested in it. He turned his head away and looked at Baozi, who was next to him, with a smile on his face. It was as if he was still thinking about the soft and warm dog meat cushion. Actually, you can use a different way of thinking to solve the problem. Yang Yi was happy to guide Shishi. He moved over and took Shishi's magnetic drawing board. He pointed at the sheep and said with a smile, "You can think of it as Chi-Chi. This is Xian Air, Chen Shiyin, Lu Weisha, and Nan Zhaoyu. This is you. And this is Momo, right?" Yes, yes. Shishi's attention was focused on the new way of thinking that her father had given her. Her bright eyes were filled with curiosity. "Now we are playing hide and seek. You are in charge of finding people. You have found your brother, Nan Zhaoyu and Lu Weisha. Who else is there? How many people have you not found?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. "There are still Chi-Chi, Xian Air, and Shiyin," Shishi said happily. "There are 3 of them. Yes. This is called the substitution method," Yang Yi said with a smile. Sometimes you can use addition and subtraction to solve problems, but sometimes you can use examples in your life to solve problems. You will find that your thinking is clearer, and complicated problems will become simpler. Shishi could not understand the last part of her father's words. However, the first part was already very interesting. The new way of thinking provided by her father seemed to have opened the door to a new world for her. However, unlike the good student Shishi, Tong Tong did not seem to have any interest in learning. Later, when Shishi explained a new problem to him, the little boy actually became sleepy. While his sister and teacher were talking, his eyelids drooped in his mother's arms. "Look at your son," Murphy whispered to Yang Yi in amusement. Yang Yi turned his head to look. The little boy was so sleepy that his head was drooping. However, perhaps because of Murphy's words, he could not help but open his sleepy eyes. He looked at his father with a pure and cute smile. However, after a while, his smile gradually disappeared. His mother changed her position, and he fell asleep sweetly. "My brother is not going to class," Shishi said regretfully. She had just finished her new painting when she realized this. Yang Yi patted Steamed Bun, who was sitting beside Murphy and looking as serious as a little guard. "It's okay. You can continue. Even if my brother is not listening, Mom and Dad are still listening. And look, Steamed Bun is also listening seriously." "Okay then." Shishi smiled cheerfully. The little girl was still not satisfied with cosplay. She felt that being Steamed Bun's teacher was also very interesting. It's over," Murphy whispered into Yang Yi's ear. "Your son will definitely be a bad student who doesn't like to go to class. He will sleep as soon as class starts." Aha! Yang Yi knew that Murphy was joking, but he still could not help but laugh. Chapter 711. On March 1st, The Fugitive was released. Nationwide, its showtimes were not high and it was ranked at the back of all the movies released at the same time. However, during the movie's off-season, it was a hot topic. It was in the top 3 most reported by the media. The main leads were Yang Yi, Geng Sha, and Guo Ziyi in a supporting role. Although they were not very famous during filming, now Yang Yi aside, Geng Sha was already the 3rd most talked about person in the country. Guo Ziyi was also a new artist who had just made a name for himself in the Ultimate Challenge. Of course, this movie was not viewed favorably. Yang Yi and Geng Sha had never acted in a movie before, and were already the main leads. Guo Ziyi had only acted in a short movie before and could not even be considered to have acted in a movie. With this kind of cast, could they make a good movie? Even though many media outlets were paying attention to The Fugitive, there were even more people waiting to see Yang Yi make a fool of himself. This movie was written, invested in, and starred by Yang Yi. Would it cause Yang Yi, who had created miracles time and time again, to suffer a painful Waterloo? Moreover, it was rumored that Yang Yi's and Murphy's daughter would be used in the movie. The reporters were eager to prove that Yang Yi's nepotism was a mistake. As for the new director, Du Yuanlei, she was completely ignored. The attendance rate for the premiere was the same as the showtimes. It was not high. This was because people who liked to watch movies either went for the few famous directors, or the familiar faces of famous movie actors in the promotional videos. This kind of movie without a big investment, a famous director, or a big-name actor obviously could not attract passers-by fans. Those who were able to watch the movie on the first day, other than Yang Yi's hardcore fans, were just some curious people. The box office on the first day is only 4.01 million. The next day, in a coffee shop on the corner, Du Yuanlei, who had just finished a phone call, read out the box office data to everyone. She had a sleepless night, and her face was full of regret and fatigue. This box office data was not considered low. There were many films that did not even reach the bottom, but it was not considered high either. In the box office of the day, it was ranked 6th. Not to mention the ones in the middle, the number 1 film, Fortuitous Encounter, had already been released for 14 days, and the box office for that day was still more than 73 million, firmly in first place. The difference between the first place and the 6th place was obvious. It was no wonder that Du Yuanlei was filled with unwillingness. I think it's mainly because of the disparity in the showtimes. The showtimes for Fortuitous Encounter are as high as 26%. How many times more is it than ours? If we can also have 26% of the showtimes, I think we can also have a box office of tens of millions. Wang Chao curled his lips and said indignantly, "It's not just the difference in the showtimes. Our investment and cast lineup can't be compared to others. I think it's already very good to have a box office of more than 4 million. Zhu Liang said with a smile. Look at Fate in the Starry Sky Reflections, which is claimed to be a sci-fi romance film with an investment of 200 million. Didn't it also flop in the premiere? Now the box office for one day is only a little more than 1 million. It's estimated that we can't even recoup the cost when it's taken down. Hey, can't you say something good? Long and I said angrily. Actually, 4 million is already very good, okay? It's only the first day of the premiere, and our first film can get more than 4 million at the box office. It's at least a passing or even a good result. And I don't blame them. I'm not satisfied either. Brother Yang's script is really good. Maybe I didn't shoot it well enough and couldn't reflect the feelings in it more deeply. Du Yuanlei blamed herself. Sister Lei, did we recoup the cost? Lu Xiaoshu, who was holding a guitar and watching their discussion, asked curiously. He was a movie novice. Miao Chuan pulled Lu Xiaoshu aside and said, Don't interrupt. It's only the first day of the box office. But 4 million isn't a small amount. Lu Xiaoshu asked in confusion. 4 million. If we want to deduct 5% of the movie's special fund, 3% of the tax, and 2% of the copyright protection fund, we have to pay for it. We also have to split it with the theater chain, distribution company, and other stakeholders. Wang Chao explained to him. In the end, Brother Yang should be able to get about 1 million. Our film's production cost isn't high. It's about 5 million. Originally, we didn't need so much. It's just that Brother Yang's requirements are more meticulous. However, the publicity cost before the movie is released is not small. Think about it. Other than dealing with the media, micro-broadcasting, and so on, Brother Yang and Geng Sha have chosen to do publicity for our film. These are all huge expenses. Of course, Extreme Selection is also their own program, so it will be cheaper. However, there will be more publicity activities later on. Adding all these together, the publicity cost is no less than 5 million. I even think that with Sister Xiaozhuan's arrangement, it might be more than 10 million. Wang Chao did the calculations, and Lu Xiaoshu was dumbfounded. In other words, the film has to be released for more than half a month before we can recoup the cost? Lu Xiaoshu took a deep breath and asked, how can the box office calculation be as simple as multiplication and division? While they were talking, Yang Yi and Murphy also arrived. Murphy's arrival with Tong Tong immediately swept away the somewhat depressing atmosphere in the coffee shop. The cute baby became the center of everyone's attention, especially the girls. Even Du Yuanlei, who was depressed just now at this moment, went over to play with Tong Tong. Looking at his big round eyes, she couldn't help but laugh. What are you guys talking about? Yang Yi smiled, patted Lu Xiaoshu's shoulder and said. Lu Xiaoshu and Wang Chao talked at once about the box office problems. Little Du, come here. Yang Yi waved his hand and called Du Yuanlei and the others over. Then he said, Xiaowan also told me about the box office. 4 million. This is a good start. Everyone quieted down and quietly listened to Yang Yi's words. Actually, I don't care about the box office. After all, this is our first film. It's an important opportunity to hone our team. Even if we lose money, I don't care. So, little Du, you don't have to put too much pressure on yourself. Yang Yi changed the thread of discussion and said, but after knowing that the box office is 4 million on the first day, I suddenly feel that our film may be a success. Why? Because we are a group of newbies, but the box office is 4 million on the first day. This is amazing. Du Yuanlei also wanted to explain that the box office was not high and was worried about the future. Yang Yi smiled and waved his hand, saying, the box office on the first day doesn't mean anything. What you should see are the comments from the audience on the internet. I read a lot before coming here. What did the audience say? Xiaoshu, read it for everyone. Lu Xiaoshu inexplicably took Yang Yi's mobile phone and began to read the comments on it. Looking at the name of the film, I thought it was a crime film. I was wrong. This is a comedy film in the guise of a crime. The whole process was funny, and the appearance of the little girl brought an unforgettable warmth to the film. Until now, I still remember the soft long hair of the little girl. There were a lot of funny points in the movie. The most memorable one was when Geng Sha was robbing a bank. Geng Sha really played the role of an idiot to the fullest. especially when the bank clerk came out from behind the counter. The whole theater was laughing. Yang Yi played the role of Rudy, a writer and singer acting in a film and playing the lead role. Can you believe it? Yang Yi vividly portrays the coldness of the criminal, and the tender interaction between him and the little girl is also heart-wrenching. It's hard to believe that this is his first time acting in a movie. I came to watch the film because of Boss Yang's name, but I didn't expect it to be a rare masterpiece. Today, I watched Destiny with my girlfriend. Objectively speaking, The Fugitive is not worse than Destiny at all. Of course, there were also negative comments. Some felt that the gunfight scene was too simple, and some felt that the portrayal of the police was too bad. There were so many people but they couldn't catch two clumsy fugitives. But overall, positive comments had the upper hand. The audience's reputation is very important. Don't just look at the box office. Now that you've heard Xiaoshu's comments, do you have more confidence in yourself? Yang Yi laughed. If the reputation can be maintained well, our box office won't just be 4 million. Lu Xiaoshu chimed in and laughed. I think so too. Chuan and I haven't seen this film, but after reading the comments, we really want to go to the theater to watch it. Du Yuanlei was just hit by the box office before. How could she not understand Yang Yi's logic? However, she wasn't very excited. Instead, she said seriously, the negative comments are right. I don't have enough control of the gunfight scene, and I don't have enough control of the action scenes. There are still many areas to improve. I will continue to study and learn. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows and laughed. Do you want to learn these? I can help you contact director Chen Fengchen and let you learn from him for a while. Du Yuanlei asked in surprise, really? That shouldn't be a problem. Yang Yi laughed, and so did everyone else. The atmosphere in the coffee shop returned to its usual positive atmosphere. After they finished talking about the film, Murphy said excitedly to Lu Xiaoshu and the others, Xiaoshu, Chuan, teacher Jean said that you guys have recently written a good song. Can you sing it for us? It was fate that brought people together in the coffee shop at the corner of the street. People with dreams got to know each other here. After a short stay, they started to run towards their own futures. Chapter 7:12. Just as Yang Yi said, The Fugitive's daily box office wouldn't just be 4 million. Indeed, after it was released, the box office increased every day due to its good reputation. However, the increase wasn't huge. After all, the accumulation and explosion of reputation still required time and an opportunity. The media's coverage of The Fugitive didn't decrease. Many film critics gave good reviews and recommended the audience to watch it. However, it seemed that someone was deliberately doing public relations. Many media outlets used the box office data and the weak gunfight scene in the movie to criticize the movie, resulting in a strange situation where both praise and blame were mixed. This kind of negative report wasn't one-sided, but half true and half false. It was hard to figure out what was going on. Although industry insiders could see the problem, the audience couldn't. It more or less affected the publicity of The Fugitive. Mo Shaowan even asked someone to investigate this matter. But the mastermind behind the scenes hid very well. It was even a trap set up through several layers of middlemen. Mo Shaowan could only helplessly give up the investigation. It could be that other movies are suppressing our showtimes. It could also be that Global Pictures, which had conflicts with us before, with Su Zhongwei's background and connections, it's not impossible for him to do something like this. Mo Shaowan could only give such a speculation. Yang Yi didn't do anything. He was waiting for the opportunity to come. The release of The Fugitive had a big impact on Xixi. This young actress had a good reputation among the audience who had watched the movie. Moreover, her parents had special identities. Naturally, the reporters wanted to follow up on Xixi. Yang Yi protected Xixi very well. Springfield Kindergarten also strictly monitored outsiders, so the reporters couldn't get in touch with Xixi. However, the pervasive reporters still got some photos of the children at kindergarten activities from some parents. Through interviews with some parents, they learned that Xixi's personality was completely different from Wang Mai, who she played in the movie. This information was slightly processed by the reporters and became one breaking news after another. There were even reporters who made up stories to attract more attention. It was as if they had really seen Shishi on set. They praised her acting skills to the heavens. This is a talented young actress who's not even 6 years old. If it was any other news, Yang Yi wouldn't have bothered to respond. However, this news made Yang Yi vigilant. Although Shishi wouldn't see it, Yang Yi didn't want his daughter to fall heavily after being praised by others. After Mo Xiaojuan's reminder, Yang Yi used his micro-broadcasting, Shishi's family chef, to send out a long micro-broadcast. Let me formally introduce our family's little cotton-padded jacket, Shishi. She's a lively and lovely little girl. Like other children, she's full of curiosity about the world, and likes to listen to her father tell her stories. She's optimistic and cheerful, and has many good friends in kindergarten. She's kind and gentle, and likes to help others. She gets along well with the cats and puppies at home. She's even full of love when she treats the little goldfish. However, I hope everyone doesn't misunderstand. Shishi is just a very ordinary child. She's not a professional actress, let alone a talented young actress. Shishi was able to play Wang Mai well not because she has a lot of talent in acting, but because there were too many enthusiastic adults on set who helped her. There was teacher Xiang Jianglei who kindly guided her, Geng Sha who specially made adjustments for her, and director Du Yuanlei who patiently explained the scene to her, and didn't get angry at her NGs. Filming is just a new experience for Shishi. It's a special and interesting experience in life. Murphy and I don't want her to continue on the path of acting. In fact, she's just like other children now. What she needs is to play to her heart's content, and enjoy a beautiful childhood. Then she can gradually learn and understand the world. When she grows up, she can choose the path she wants to take. Murphy and I don't have high expectations for the children. And we won't use grades as the standard to measure a child's growth. We only hope that she and her brother can first be healthy, second be happy, and third be as successful as possible. But most importantly, they have to know that they're ordinary people. Under this micro-broadcasting, there was also a photo of Shishi's face that Yang Yi was willing to give out for the first time. The first photo was of Shishi smiling happily while eating cake. The second photo was of Shishi holding a card camera to take a picture of the little goldfish in the fish tank. The third photo was of the little girl wearing a piggy costume. Finally, there was a photo of the set. In it, Shishi was wearing Wang Mai's student costume. She was in the arms of old master Xiang Jianglei, smiling happily. Yang Yi didn't know how big of an impact his micro-broadcasting had had. Shishi's fans, who had originally liked Shishi, felt sorry for her when they saw her sad and pitiful appearance in the movie. Now that they saw Shishi's daily photos, they felt relieved, but their love for her had increased by a little. The sad Wang Mai had a special quality that made people want to dote on her, and the innocent Shishi in her daily life made people want to dote on her even more. Shishi's charm was irresistible. Not only did the adults like such a little girl, but they also wanted such a kind and beautiful daughter who loved to smile. Some young people who didn't have children were also attracted by Shishi's cuteness. Under Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting, it was unknown who started it, but more and more people jokingly called him father-in-law. Father-in-law, you have to take good care of my wife. It's raining in Jiangcheng. Don't let her catch a cold. Father-in-law, why are my wife's legs so thin? Is it because you don't feed her enough? Do you want me to treat you to a meal? Father-in-law, please accept a bow from your son-in-law. Father-in-law, when my Shishi's hair reaches her waist, I'll bring millions of betrothal money to marry her, okay? Although it was just a group of netizens teasing, the embryonic form of the nation's father-in-law could be seen. The media's reports also followed up, especially the last paragraph of Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting, which was quoted by the media. Although they were still talking about Shishi, the media's interest in Shishi had unknowingly shifted to the reporting of Yang Yi and Murphy's way of educating their children. They looked for clues from Yang Yi and Murphy's daily micro-broadcasting, and analyzed Yang Yi and Murphy's way of educating their children. After this paragraph was reported by the media, many parents also paid attention to it. The more they read, the more they felt that it made sense. Some people regarded it as a Bible, and some people began to reflect on their own way of educating their children. Of course, these external influences were almost invisible to Shishi. She could feel the change in her unexpected popularity. She could feel the strange gazes from the parents and the curiosity of the children in the kindergarten towards her. For example, on this day Wang Shijuan, who rarely spoke to Shishi, suddenly ran over and looked at Shishi strangely. She then asked, Shishi, my mom said that you've become a big star, right? What's a big star? Lu Weisha asked. It was the first time that she had heard this word in Chinese. Hey, you're a foreigner. You don't know anything. Wang Shijuan said proudly. Let me tell you. A big star is very famous people, and they will even appear on TV. My dad said that I'm not a big star. Shishi said to Wang Shijuan seriously. But you're very famous. Wang Shijuan scratched her head and said, My mom asked me and my sister to play with you. Wang Shiyun said unwillingly. I don't want to play with Shishi. It wasn't a big conflict, but children had their own social circles. Then we don't want to play with you either, Chen Shiyin shouted. Then forget it. Wang Shijuan ran away, as if she didn't take it seriously at all, and it was just a task that her mom had given her. This made Shishi very confused. When she came back at night, she asked her father, Why do people say that I'm a big star? Wang Shijuan doesn't want to play with me, but her mom asked her to play with me? People say that because they have a misunderstanding. They think that you're very good at acting in movies, so they say that. But Uncle Gua has also acted in movies. You, Chen Shiyin, and Xionaire have also acted in movies. Will you call them big stars? Yang Yi said with a smile. No, I won't. Big stars don't sound nice. The little girl shook her head and said innocently, I also don't like them calling me big stars. I'm Shishi. That's right. But we can't stop others from talking, right? We just need to know that we're still us. Dad is still Dad, Shishi is still Shishi, and Xionaire is still Xionaire. Dad loves Shishi, and Shishi and Xionaire are still good friends. Everything is still the same as before, right? Yang Yi said with a smile. Yes. The little girl smiled sweetly. She liked what her father said, but subconsciously, she didn't like Wang Shijuan's tone. Then it's fine. Don't care about what others say, we just need to be ourselves. Yang Yi patted his daughter's head lovingly. Fortunately, these effects were minimal, and Yang Yi could help Shishi slowly adapt to these changes. Life was always full of changes. Being afraid of changes and cowering would not solve the problem. Yang Yi wanted his daughter to learn to be herself in the midst of changes. Chapter 7:13. There was no grand press conference, only a little mention on micro-broadcasting. After Yang Yi and Murphy's 2 versions of Love of a Lifetime were completed on March 7th, they quietly landed on major music websites. However, after the song was released, the sales were not as hot as usual, and there was even a feeling of coolness. This was not because the promotion was not enough, but because the song was placed in the Cantonese section. Other than the fans who spoke Cantonese, who chose to buy the single without hesitation, the fans in other regions, except for the hardcore ones, all stopped in their tracks. Even if some passerby fans hesitated and bought the song, without any background story, they were confused. Even if the melody was moving, they felt that they had lost out, and the evaluation they gave was suddenly not very high. However, the fans who could understand and had some life experience still gave the song a very high evaluation. To buy or not to buy? Many people were watching. Looking at the different rhetoric in the comments, the onlookers flinched. However, the media engaged in the music industry have been in high spirits. The songs written by Yang Yi can't even squeeze into the top 50 sales, which is a very rare thing. Li Shijian, a professional music critic, was hired to write a music review column in Voice of China. Although with the development of the internet, the audience of music review columns in traditional media has been much smaller, Voice of China magazine has actively improved and also cooperated with the company's Tianjai Music website. Music news and music review articles in print media will also be uploaded to the internet for fans to read. Therefore, Li Shijian, who has unique insights and analysis in music and is sophisticated in writing, still has a lot of fans, and most of the fans are similar to Li Shijian's style of music. From reading Li Shijian's column, they can find the music they like. On this day, Li Shijian received an invitation from the editor-in-chief, asking him to comment on Yang Yi's new song, Love of a Lifetime. Of course, the editor-in-chief had some bad intentions. He hoped that Li Shijian could analyze the reason why Yang Yi's new song was not popular, which would make it convenient for them to make a big fuss in the news module. I'll listen to it first. Li Shijian responded indifferently. Li Shijian's impression of Yang Yi was still very good. In the past, Li Shijian gave high praise to songs such as Listen to the Sea and Coming Across the Sea to See You. What kind of song would this Love of a Lifetime be? It can't be a love song, right? To be honest, Li Shijian was a little tired of listening to Yang Yi and Murphy sing love songs. Sweet songs couldn't express the kind of unforgettable feelings like Listen to the Sea. But before making a judgment, Li Shijian cleared his mind and forgot who Yang Yi was, who Murphy was, and the songs they had sung before. Then he started to listen to the music. The first song that Li Shijian listened to was Yang Yi's version, which was similar to the one that Yang Yi had sung for his grandfather. The accompaniment was very pure, and it was a simple guitar solo. But just from the prelude, Li Shijian could tell something. It didn't sound like a normal pop tune. The charming and gentle string notes seemed to have a bit of an exotic flavor. Slow, very slow. The melody of this song should have a sad tone. Li Shijian was energized. Then Yang Yi's singing came. Although the Cantonese lyrics made Li Shijian frown slightly, he could understand some Cantonese. But after all, he was not an authentic native speaker of Cantonese. It was a bit difficult to listen to it now. However, Yang Yi's singing was refreshing to Li Shijian. It was not popular at all, and it was not retro at all. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as old and melancholy. Li Shijian had never heard this kind of singing before. It was very unique, but it was unique and not abrupt. Li Shijian was very comfortable listening to it, especially the singing that was low and sometimes high. When it was low, it made people feel confused, and when it was high, it made people feel like they were in a barren wilderness. A sense of desolation arose spontaneously. The sea of bitterness turns up love and hate. It's hard to escape fate in the world. Li Shijian felt as if his heart was pierced by a sky full of arrows. There was a kind of powerless sorrow. He did not seem to have the time to think carefully about the meaning of the lyrics. Just Yang Yi's singing was enough to make Li Shijian fall into it. After listening to the song, Li Shijian found that his eyes were a little wet. However, he still did not understand what the song was about. After 3 hours, Li Shijian took off his headphones. However, he flipped through the pages that were full of notes. He did not intend to write a music review immediately. Li Shijian could not wait to pick up his phone and make a call. Old Pooh, are you asleep? If you are not, quickly get up. I recommend you to listen to a song. No, 2 songs. 2 singing styles of the same song. It's not a Mandarin song. It's your Cantonese song. Even I, a person who does not speak Cantonese, think it's good. Quickly come and give it a try. Yang Yi wrote it. Yes. The Yang Yi who wrote Better Not See and Bicycle. Both versions are very good. I didn't expect that Mo Fei can sing Cantonese songs, and she can sing them so well. But I prefer Yang Yi's version. It's not that Murphy's is not good. Her accompaniment is richer, and her singing is tactful enough. But Yang Yi's version is very special. It's the first time I've seen a guitar solo and a singing style. You'll know when you listen to it. It's absolutely good. In addition to looking for Old Pooh, Li Shijian also recommended it to several familiar music critics in Harbor City. He was so excited that he picked up the pen and wrote his own music review in the middle of the night. However, his editor-in-chief was obviously going to be disappointed. The Cantonese songs were not well received. In fact, Yang Yi and Murphy were psychologically prepared. So although many media were laughing at them, Yang Yi and Murphy did not care. Their lives were not affected. It was another weekend. During breakfast, Shishi held a small spoon and asked with interest, "Papa, where are we going to play today?" Yang Yi asked with a smile, "Where do you want to go?" Just when the little girl was thinking, Murphy suddenly gave a suggestion. "Shishi, do you like dancing? Why don't you go to the studio with me today to practice dancing? I can teach you how to dance." Tong Tong was born at the end of November last year. Now Murphy had been giving birth naturally for nearly 4 months. Her body had recovered very well, and simple jogging to lose weight was no longer able to meet her needs. So a few days ago, after the doctor confirmed that she could dance, Mo Fei couldn't wait to take out the dancing shoes and clothes that she had bought a month ago. Okay. The little girl's eyes lit up and she nodded happily. She giggled and said, "Mama, I really like dancing. Then I can dance 2 dances and 3 dances. Teacher Shin taught us how to dance. Chi-Chi and I are the best at dancing." As she spoke, she became more energetic. She looked at Murphy expectantly and said, "Mom, can we ask Chi-Chi to dance with us?" And Xian Air Lu Weisha. She even started counting. This little girl, as she grew up, talked about her friends more and more. Although she was willing to play with her parents now, when she grew up in her teens or 20s, puberty and rebellious, would she still be willing to accompany her parents? Of course, this would be a long time in the future. But when she thought about it occasionally, it was still a little sad. Murphy looked at Yang Yi helplessly and smiled bitterly. However, Murphy still agreed to her daughter's request. Anyway, the studio built for them was very big. It was enough for this group of children to dance wildly in it. But after a few rounds of phone calls, only Lu Weisha's mother, Marilla, agreed. Lan Xian was brought by her mother to Jinling City to reunite with Boss Lan this weekend. Yang Luoqi, who was the best dancer, had to go to tutoring class today. Chen Shiyin and Nan Zhaoyu's parents were not free, so they could only apologize to Xi. Luckily, at least there was still Lu Weisha. Although Xi felt sorry, she didn't feel too sorry. Chapter 7:14. When Phoebe's studio was first set up, Yang Yi had provided sufficient funds to allow Mo Shaowan to do whatever she wanted. Therefore, this average-size 4-story building was fully equipped with all the necessary equipment. If Yang Yi had been the one to design this dance studio, he definitely would not have thought of this. However, Mo Shaowan knew that Murphy liked to dance, so she had already prepared everything. Clap, clap, clap. After turning on the lights, heating, and ventilation, the bright and clean dance studio was presented to Yang Yi and the others. It seemed that there were people who came here regularly to clean the place. After she followed her parents into the dance studio, she could not help but run to the innermost part of the room and cried out excitedly, "What a big mirror!" Her black leather boots squeaked as she stepped on the wooden floor. However, the little girl only cared about going to the mirror and holding on to the long railing used to press her legs. She looked at herself in the mirror with joy. The little girl in the mirror was so beautiful. Her braided hair was tied up like a bohemian hairband. The rest of her soft, thick hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, touching the lace skirt at her waist. Her hair was beautiful, and she was even more beautiful. Her face had the golden ratio, and her cheeks still had a little baby fat. When she smiled, she was like a small, delicate, and pure jasmine flower blooming. The white, fluffy skirt made the little girl look like a little angel without wings. However, this beauty did not last long. The little girl made a face at herself in the mirror, and then looked at her father and mother in the mirror. She giggled, and her bell-like laughter echoed in the big dance studio. "Come over here and change your shoes. You can't wear shoes like that in the dance studio." Murphy was still very strict. She scolded her as she changed her shoes. She ran over to change into her dancing shoes and took off her jacket. She finally looked like a little dancer. Murphy dressed Xi in a full set of dance attire, which made her look like a ballerina. The sleeves were dark purple with velvet sleeves. The dress suddenly turned light purple at the chest and gradually transitioned to pure white at the waist. The fluffy skirt was also propped up like a ballet dress, but it didn't hang down softly. This was also Cece's favorite part. She felt as if she had grown wings with these. Below the skirt, the thin, close-fitting pantyhose was connected to her feet, revealing Cece's slender calves that were usually covered by her clothes. If the little girl really stood on her tiptoes like a ballet dancer, she might really be able to perfectly interpret the magical concept of all legs below the neck. Mo Fei and Cece were wearing the same parent-child dance costumes. Of course, Mo Fei's figure was too good. Although in her opinion, after giving birth to the second child. Mo Fei's waist was a little thicker. After all, Mo Fei was tall and slim, and her long legs did not show any signs of weight gain. On the contrary, her curvaceous figure was stretched tight by the tight dance attire, making her look like the devil. Yang Yi watched from the back and felt a little restless. However, since the two children were here, he could only forget about any bold ideas. After changing his shoes, Yang Yi sat at the back and had no intention of dancing. He picked up Tong Tong, who was in the pram beside him, and pointed at the reflection in the mirror to tease Tong Tong. The little boy was a little confused when he saw himself in the mirror for the first time. Of course, there was nothing special about the little boy with a round head and round eyes in the mirror. The little boy probably would not guess that it was him, nor would he think too much about it. However, when he looked up, he saw that the person holding the little boy in the mirror looked exactly the same as the person holding his father. Tong Tong stared blankly at his father in the mirror for a while. Then he turned his head in confusion, looked at his father beside him, and then looked back again. He did not understand why there were two fathers. Of course, the little boy's mind was not that detailed, so all his confusion was still in a hazy and chaotic state. This is a mirror. The mirror will reflect you. Yang Yi intimately whispered in the little boy's ear, leaning his head against the little boy's head and rubbing it gently. Tong Tong's little mouth was slightly open, and his little pink tongue was clearly visible. He curiously reached out his little hand and scratched his father's face. Of course, this scratch was soft and weak. Murphy and Shishi had already started playing. First, Murphy asked Shishi to dance the dance that she had learned in kindergarten, and Murphy played the beat for her. 122, 2222, 3222. Shishi was a little shy when she started dancing, especially when she saw herself dancing in the mirror. After a while, the little girl was so shy that her little face was dyed with a blush. She ran to her mother's side, hugged her mother's waist and bashfully jumped in. "Don't be shy. You dance very well," Murphy said with a smile. No. The little girl giggled, raised her little head, and shook it like a rattledrum. "Mom, dance." Murphy wanted to set an example, so she smiled and said, "Okay, Mom, dance. You have to learn from her." Murphy turned around and asked Yang Yi to take out the dance music cassette that she had prepared. She stuffed it into the equipment hanging on the wall, and after a while, the melody of the music started to play. This was a dance music that was a little like High School Musical, with a lively melody and a passionate drum beat. Just by listening to it, one would have the urge to twist and turn. With the rise and fall of the melody, Murphy, who was not shy at all, really started to dance like the young people in High School Musical. Of course, it was not a very intense street dance. Although the range of movements was big, it was also very simple. Waving hands, turning, twisting waist. These were very sparse and ordinary dance movements. But when paired with the light dance steps, it gave people a feeling of vitality and a sense of youthfulness. It was also Yang Yi's ignorance that Murphy's dance was indeed a dance from a movie that was popular all over the world more than 10 years ago. It was born from the elements of street dance and dance dramas, and after it became popular in the movie, many young people rushed to imitate it. At this moment, Murphy, who was already in her 30s, was dancing the dance that she liked in the past. With every frown and smile, it was as if she had returned to the time when she was 15 or 16 years old. At that time, Murphy was in her prime, youthful and lively. Yang Yi was stunned, and Shishi was also watching with great interest. How could the little girl stay still? She was bouncing around and unconsciously twisting and turning with her mother, but she could not keep up with her movements. Tong Tong also had a reaction, but he was not looking at his mother who was dancing. The little guy was still looking at the world in the mirror, but his ears were listening to the dance music that was reverberating in the dance studio. The passionate drum beat made Tong Tong, who had listened to countless kinds of music when he was a fetus, stretch his eyebrows, reveal his little dimples, and open his little mouth to smile. As if the smile was not enough, the little guy's hands continued to sway as if he was intoxicated by the energetic dance music. If Yang Yi was not looking at his beautiful wife, but at his son, he might have noticed that Tong Tong's little hands were unconsciously moving to the rhythm of the dance music. After Murphy finished dancing, she was slightly out of breath. After all, after being pregnant, she had not exercised much for more than a year. She turned around to get some water from her bag and saw Yang Yi, who was sitting there staring straight at her. Come and dance too. Don't just sit there. Murphy chuckled and said in annoyance. Chapter 7:15. You can play with Shishi, right? Yang Yi held Tong Tong and said with a wry smile. I have to take care of Hua Hua. He was not very interested in dancing. Moreover, he had not danced for a long time. If he danced badly, wouldn't it be shameful? How could he affect Cece's omnipotent, glorious, and magnificent image of him? Just leave him in the crib. Anyway, there's no one else here. Moreover, we can hear everything clearly. Murphy giggled as she pulled Yang Yi's arm and said, Come and play with us. Moreover, I don't believe that you didn't learn how to dance when you learned so many musical instruments when you were in the army. Hee hee, Papa, let's dance together. Let's dance together. The little girl also ran over to join in the fun. She danced beside her father and shouted with a smile. Yang Yi did not want to dampen the spirits of Murphy and Shishi. He carried Tong Tong, who was a little confused by the fun, into the crib, stood up, spread out his hands and helplessly said, Okay, but I have to tell you that I didn't learn many kinds of dance before. It was mainly social dance. Indeed, they didn't learn to pick up girls. It was just to make it easier for them to go in and out of some big occasions and hide their identity. Dance for us. Murphy laughed as she took out Yang Yi's SLR camera from her bag. Why do you want to use this? Yang Yi felt that something was wrong. Take a picture. In the future, when Hua Hua grows up, you can tell him that when you were young, Daddy and Mommy went to dance. Murphy said excitedly. Forget about it. I still need a dance partner. Social dance can't be done alone. How weird would that be? Yang Yi said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Murphy could only regretfully put down the SLR camera. However, Shishi was interested. She ran over and picked it up. The little girl looked delicate, but her strength was not small. She picked up the heavy SLR camera. Hee hee, Papa, let me do it, okay? The little girl had already learned how to use this DSLR from her father. She said sweetly, but her head was lowered. She looked at the DSLR and operated it with some difficulty, mainly because Shishi's hands were too small. Murphy guessed Yang Yi's thoughts and joked. Do you regret teaching Shishi how to take photos? Since that was the case, Yang Yi pulled himself together and danced with 120% concentration. He couldn't let his daughter look down on him. Although there was no accompaniment, Murphy was able to sing the beat in a low voice. Da-da-da-da-da. Although it was the first time the two danced together, they cooperated very well. Yang Yi stepped forward with his left foot, and Murphy stepped back with her right foot. The next Yang Yi stepped forward with his right foot, and Murphy stepped back with her left foot. They walked straight up as if they were following each other like a shadow. The two were tied together with a rope. In fact, Yang Yi and Murphy were also a little surprised. Murphy was even worried that Yang Yi didn't know how to dance, so she wanted to slow down a little to cooperate with him. However, she didn't expect the two to cooperate so perfectly. This feeling of tacit understanding was wonderful. Murphy raised her head and couldn't help but look at Yang Yi's face. Yang Yi also lowered his head and looked at Murphy affectionately. At this moment, because of the tacit understanding, the love in the two's eyes became more mellow and rich like wine. Of course, with a little movement of the shoulders and elbows, it might be even more perfect. Murphy felt that Yang Yi had completed the rapid transition from being unfamiliar to proficient. She stared into Yang Yi's eyes, and the movement of her shoulders increased a little. Her hips also gently twisted, as if she had integrated the soul of Lampard's dance into the slow dance. Murphy, who had a hot body to begin with, was now twisting rhythmically, which made the surrounding temperature rise by a lot. Yang Yi understood Murphy's meaning. He gently held Murphy's hand, and the movement of his upper body also increased. He catered to Murphy's rhythm, vividly displaying his elegance. The two's tacit understanding of the dance brought out the taste of happiness. The most interesting part was the next turn. Yang Yi took steady steps, and at the same time as Murphy, he turned his hands and body together. Then, with a tacit understanding, they looked at Shishi, who was holding the SLR camera and watching with great interest, forgetting to take photos. Although she didn't know how to appreciate dancing, she still felt that the tacit understanding between her parents was very interesting. However, when her parents finished, they suddenly turned their heads to her, which surprised the little girl. Looking at her surprised and confused big eyes, Yang-yi and Murphy laughed and let go of each other's hands. Yang-yi even walked over and took the SLR camera from his daughter's hands with a smile. "Papa, why did you and Mom suddenly look at me?" The little girl came back to her senses, and only then did she realize that her parents were just teasing her, so she shouted unwillingly, "We didn't suddenly look at you. That was when we finished." Murphy fooled her. "What do you think of our dance?" Yang-yi patted Shishi's soft long hair on the back of her shoulder and asked, "It's super good. It's even better than Mr. Shun's." Shishi took her father's hand and said with a smile, "Do you want to learn?" Yang-yi said with a smile. Shishi's eyes lit up, and her head nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. "Shishi, you also need to drink some water." Murphy was tired, so she rested for a while and fed Tong Tong, who was hungry. When she heard that Shishi wanted to learn ballroom dancing from Yang-yi, she said, "If you want to learn, I'll teach you some new dances later. Don't dance the dance that we just did. If you're interested, you can learn that kind of dance when you grow up, but for now, you should learn some young people's dances from me." Murphy also knew these traditional dances, but that was only because she learned them from Zhou Mingyu when she was a child. Murphy herself didn't like them very much. Traditional dances were not like popular dances. They were more used in formal occasions, and those formal occasions were exactly what Murphy didn't like. Murphy liked the personality and vitality of popular dances, as well as the endless creativity. "Mom, what are young people's dances?" Shishi asked curiously. "Young people's dances are street dances, jazz dances, and so on." Murphy hugged Tong Tong and smiled. "Mom will show you later. You'll definitely like it." Seeing Murphy talking to Shishi, Yang-yi was somewhat unconvinced. How could he let Shishi think that Daddy's dances were old dances? Daddy can dance very well too. Ahem, Shishi, in fact, Daddy can also dance street dances. Yang-yi felt that he had to show off his skills. Murphy looked at Yang-yi in surprise. She was a little unsure whether Yang-yi was pretending to be fat or pretending to be weak. Of course, Murphy felt that the latter was more likely. How could she not know Yang-yi? His favorite thing to do was to pretend that he didn't know anything, but in fact he knew everything. "Papa, what is street dance?" Shishi was like a little fangirl. After throwing down the kettle, she giggled, moved to her father's side, and asked enthusiastically, "How should I describe street dance? It's just a random street dance. There are many kinds of street dances." Yang-yi didn't know how to explain. If he really pretended to be weak, Murphy would accept it. Who asked this enigmatic and charming man to keep her under his control? Murphy also looked at Yang-yi expectantly and said, "Dance for me and Shishi. You didn't say that you knew street dance just now." Yang-yi really didn't know how to street dance, but he had seen other people doing street dance. He didn't know how to do complicated dance, and it was too late to learn it now. However, Yang-yi thought that because of his physical advantage, there was a kind of street dance that he could do. Chapter 716. Was street dancing difficult? Perhaps it was more difficult for people with uncoordinated bodies and a lack of rhythm to learn. But Yang-yi was different. If he really wanted to learn street dancing, with his body coordination, it should be a piece of cake. But because he was not very interested in dancing before, he did not learn it. But now that he was going to perform a street dance for Shishi and Murphy, Yang-yi could only bite the bullet and do it. Fortunately, he knew what to do. If he couldn't do other things on the spot, he might be able to do a robot dance. Strictly speaking, the general category of robot dance could not be used to describe the dance Yang-yi was going to perform. It was more accurate to say that it was a robot dance. Space dance was cool, but it required very complicated footwork. Yang-yi had not studied it before. But it was just a robot dance for Yang-yi, who was an expert who could perfectly control every muscle and every joint in his body. It should be easier to control. Yang-yi closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The muscles under his clothes were trembling in an inconspicuous manner. He also twisted his arms and waist, and soon finished warming up. Murphy looked at Yang Yi's movements and secretly guessed what kind of dance Yang Yi was going to do. Her curiosity was getting stronger and stronger. "Papa, you can do it! Papa, you can do it!" The king of support, Shishi, appeared again. She excitedly jumped beside her father, and her fluffy skirt swayed gently with her jump. "Ready? Shishi, you have to open your eyes and don't miss a single detail." Yang Yi pretended to exaggerate and teased Shishi with a smile. He stood in front of Shishi loosely, and did not have any posture to dance. Shishi did not pay attention to it. She thought that her father was still joking with her. The little girl giggled and blinked her big eyes in front of her father. She was very naughty. But without any warning, Yang Yi's head suddenly hung down. His shoulders and waist seemed to have lost the support of his spine. They hung down softly as if they were going to fall to the ground at any time. Shishi did not know what was going on. She looked on in surprise. Murphy could not help but exclaim. She was frightened by Yang Yi's state. Then Murphy saw Yang Yi stiffly twisting the front half of his right arm like a robot. When the rest of his body remained motionless, she understood what kind of dance Yang Yi was doing. Robot dance also existed in this world. At this time, it would be better if there was a rusty sound. Mo Fei imagined these accompaniments by herself. She saw that Yang Yi seemed to have found his bones one by one, stiffly swinging his arms one after another, and then turning his face to the side and smiling strangely and evilly at her and Cece. "How world?" Yang Yi said in an electronic voice. Cece was a little dazed. It was only when her father said this that she couldn't help but turn her head and run to her mother. She didn't say that she was afraid, but the little girl timidly burrowed into her mother's arms and squeezed together with her brother. But she could not help but be curious. She turned her little head and looked at her father. She giggled and said to her mom, "Mom, Papa's words are so strange, just like Lu Weisha. Your papa is doing a robot dance." Murphy smiled and explained to her daughter, "Don't you think he looks like a robot?" She blinked her big clear eyes. She saw her father turn around like a robot. His steps were as stiff and slow as his swinging hands. 1 step, 2 steps, he walked slowly. It was very magical. Yes, the little girl was no longer afraid. She was fascinated. The climax was when Yang Yi was about to enter hibernation again. His head drooped down, but his 2 arms seemed to be nailed. With his elbow joint as a fulcrum, his 2 forearms seemed to be broken, hanging down and swinging with the wind. Wow! Murphy could not help but praise. She felt that Yang Yi's dance was really good. Although the connection of each section was very stiff, and the combination of movements was not carefully choreographed, the essence of the robot dance was perfectly reflected. At this moment, he was not a human but a real robot. And it was an old-fashioned, clumsy robot. "Papa is so amazing!" She also shouted with her mother. Her eyes seemed to be blooming with little stars as she looked at her father with infatuation. However, it was a pity that although Yang Yi performed the robot dance, he still could not become Shishi's dance instructor. The robot dance he performed was not suitable for Shishi, who was still in the growing stage. However, Yang Yi, who had shown off in front of his daughter, was also satisfied and stepped back to focus on being a stay-at-home dad for Tong Tong. Of course, Yang Yi also secretly wondered if he should also figure out a space dance that had not appeared in this world yet. MJ's space dance was the truly cool one. If he jumped in front of his daughter, he might be able to gain another round of adoration from her, right? Yang Yi's imagination ran wild. However, he did not expect that his mission today was not over yet. After a while, Lu Weisha came with her mother. David was said to be busy with the transfer of his position in the company, and could not come today. But it did not matter. The key was that Lu Weisha could come and play with Shishi. As soon as the 2 little girls met, they huddled together excitedly and talked. After a while, Shishi, with a bright smile, took Lu Weisha's hand and ran to her father's side. "Papa, I told Lu Weisha that my papa could dance like a robot." Then Lu Weisha said she also wanted to see it. "Papa, can you dance for her again?" For Shishi, the most magical thing today was her father's dance. Of course, she could not wait to tell her little friends. Looking at his daughter's expectant eyes, how could Yang Yi be willing to refuse? After playing in the dance studio for a whole day, she came back in the evening. The little girl was also tired, so she went to bed early. However, Tong Tong was in high spirits. Maybe it was because he listened to a lot of dance music in the dance studio today that made him excited. After taking a bath, the little boy played with his parents in bed until 10 o'clock. The little boy did not feel sleepy until Murphy fed him milk. Tong Tong, who finally fell asleep, was carried back to the crib and covered him with a quilt. Murphy took off her pajamas, leaving only her light pink bikini underwear on. She got into bed and squeezed to Yang Yi, who was reading a book. As soon as Yang Yi put down the book, she hugged Yang Yi's thick arm and gently stroked Yang Yi's palm with her fingers. She said softly, "Darling, are you tired from dancing today?" Yang Yi's heart was moved. He wrapped Murphy's soft hands in his big hands and said with a smile, "How can I be tired? I was worried that you were tired." Murphy did not respond to Yang Yi's words. Instead, she gently rubbed Yang Yi's cheek with her forehead. "I feel so happy to dance with you today. I will never forget this tacit understanding in my life." "You like the ballroom dance we did? Don't tell me you don't like my dance?" Yang Yi chuckled. Murphy thought that Yang Yi was unromantic and said angrily, "Your mechanical dance is also okay. But don't you think that the tacit understanding we had when we danced together was very beautiful? So, do you like a gentle gentleman tonight? Or a strong and powerful robot?" Yang Yi said in Murphy's ear. His hot breath immediately dyed Murphy's sparkling earlobes and white cheeks red. That depends on how strong. Murphy's breath was in disorder. "You can try." Yang Yi suddenly lifted the quilt and hugged Murphy. He held her legs with both hands and pressed them against the wall. Ah! The room was filled with exclamations. Chapter 717. There was progress in the adaptation of the fairy tale. And this time, it was not some shell company that wanted to cheat him of the copyright. According to Lu Benji's introduction over the phone, this animation company called Mantis Shrimp was very sincere. Not only was the price generous, but they were also willing to compromise on the peripheral copyright. For this reason, Yang Yi decided to spare a day to meet the boss, producer, and other team members of Mantis Shrimp's team at the publishing house. Speaking of which, Mantis Shrimp was a domestic animation company. When Yang Yi first heard about it, he subconsciously wanted to reject the deal. However, after some investigation, he found that the Chinese animation industry in this world was not weak. Perhaps it was because of the complete copyright protection. The domestic animation industry was developing very well. There were endless talents and studios to draw comics. For example, when Yang Yi asked Lu Benji to recruit artists to set up a picture book department, it took less than a week for more than 40 artists to be hired. The core of the animation industry was not the artists, but the technology. Yang Yi used to watch children's animation with Shishi. After watching real animated movies and serialized anime series, he realized that the Chinese animation industry was not worse than Japan in Yang Yi's previous life. Of course, the animation industry was similar to the movie industry. There were big animation companies and small animation companies. There were excellent animation works, and there were also a lot of bad movies that filled the market. According to the investigation, the scale of Mantis Shrimp could only be considered average. However, their works were not bad. They maintained 1 or 2 new works every year, and their box office and reputation were always high. They were strong contenders for the annual Best Animated Feature Film Award. That was why Lu Benji tried his best to change Yang Yi's prejudice against domestic animation. That was why Yang Yi was willing to come to the publishing company. Ewing only had 1 day off a week. Because she was in the F&B industry, she could not take a break on weekends. She usually chose to take a break on Mondays. However, Ewing was on holiday today. She did not rest at home. After sending Yu Xiaowei to school, she took the bus to Tingshan District with her bag. "Hello, how can I help you?" Ewing had just walked into the office building of Sahara Publishing when a receptionist noticed her. She looked at Ewing and asked with a smile, "Hello, I'm here to submit my book today. Didn't your publishing house set up a children's book author support fund?" Ewing said with the same smile. In fact, receptionists were also considered to be in the service industry. Yu Ying and the other party were considered to be in the same line of work. Although Yu Ying was calm now, she was actually a little nervous. She took out a stack of papers from her bag. Her hand was a little tight on the papers, but the receptionist couldn't see these details. Yes, Yu Ying had come to submit her article. After her discussion with her colleagues, she had a preliminary understanding of Yang Yi and Sahara Publishing House. She could roughly judge that the advertisement in the book was not the kind of brainless scam similar to text message scams. Although she still wasn't sure, Yu Ying was eager to get the support money. That way, she would have the money to buy a better house for her mother and daughter, and improve their lives. In fact, she even longed to be like Yang Yi, who was described in a certain article, turning from a poor mother to a famous author. If she could become a full-time author one day, Yu Ying would have more time to accompany her daughter as she grew up. Therefore, for the past 2 weeks, after Yu Ying came back from work, she thought about her story and wrote the outline and the first 3 chapters according to the requirements of the advertisement. It was very tiring to go to work. When she came back, she still had to lie in front of her desk and write under the dim light. Yu Ying had been sleeping in bed for the past 2 weeks. The combination of physical and mental fatigue made her a little overwhelmed. Yu Ying was only so nervous because she had high hopes for him. "You want to submit your book to the Children's Book Author Support Fund?" the receptionist asked in surprise. "Of course, that's not a problem. However, you can send it through express mail, Sahara Express, or even email it directly to our mailbox. There's no need for you to come to Jiangqing in person." Yu Ying quickly told the receptionist that she was also from Jiangqing. She held her handwritten manuscript and said embarrassedly, "And I think it's more sincere to come here in person. There are some questions that I would like to consult the editors of the foundation." The receptionist didn't make things difficult for Yu Ying. She smiled and said, "Okay, please wait a moment. I'll help you ask which editor can receive you. The foundation was set up by our boss. Everything is handled by us. Therefore, the editor of our publishing house is also the editor of the foundation." After a while, a bald middle-aged man with a kind attitude came out. He shook hands with Yu Ying and said, "Hello, I'm Wen Xiefeng, the editor of Sahara Publishing House." When Xiefeng heard that Yu Ying had some questions in addition to the submission, he asked the receptionist to book a small conference room for him. He and Yu Ying sat down and talked in detail. "Actually, a lot of authors called to consult about your questions some time ago." After listening to Yu Ying's question, Wen Xiefeng said with a smile, "First of all, I have to clarify that this foundation is a private support fund set up by our boss. The purpose is, of course, to allow more excellent children's books to emerge. Therefore, we don't operate this support fund with the selfish intention of seizing the creativity of new authors or the copyright. When reviewing the manuscript, we also use the outline and the content of the first 3 chapters you provided as the object of inspection. If it's really an excellent work, we will provide financial support. After that, there will be some corresponding free writing training. We can even help you make your work into a picture book and help you expand the market. I believe you already know all these. Why did I say that you don't have to worry about your creativity being stolen?" Wen Xiefeng smiled and said, "Because we don't know if you have registered the copyright for your work. In principle, we encourage authors to register the copyright first before submitting to us. Even if you don't understand or forget to register the copyright, after we approve it, we will remind you to find a lawyer to register the copyright first. Then we will sign the support contract." With the protection of the copyright organization, Yu Ying really didn't have to worry about these problems. "Then what are your criteria for reviewing the manuscript? Do you think I can get support money for this manuscript?" Yu Ying asked nervously. "Whether you can or cannot, I can't tell you yet. Because for the same manuscript, we will arrange for 5 editors to take turns reviewing it. If more than half of the editors think it's okay, then the manuscript will be handed to our deputy editor and chief editor. Of course, at this time, after the review of the 5 editors, as long as the work doesn't have any major problems, you can get 10,000 support money. The deputy editor has the right to decide between 10,000 and 30,000 support money. If your work wants to get 40,000 to 50,000 support money, then you have to go through the review of our chief editor and chief editor. Wen Xiefeng explained. So strict? Ewing showed a surprised look. Why does it feel more difficult than the college entrance examination? Wen Xiefeng smiled and said, Isn't this also being responsible for you authors? The rules are clear, and the responsibilities are clear, to prevent some excellent works from being buried. Ewing, who was afraid of exams since she was a child, felt a lot of psychological pressure. She was a little breathless and had to take a breather. So, Ewing excused herself to go to the bathroom, and came out to the corridor to breathe in the fresh air. Just when she reached the corner of the corridor, Ewing heard the conversation between the two men. I'm basically satisfied with Mantis Shrimp's conditions, but you can ask them if it's possible for us to participate in the investment. Or if their boss agrees, I can invest in Mantis Shrimp. Yang Yi smiled as he patted Lu Benji's shoulder. The second possibility is less likely. Mantis Shrimp's boss is rich and doesn't lack money. Lu Benji pondered and said, but let's give it a try. I'll get the negotiation team to talk to them. And if it's really not possible, then I won't force it. Yang Yi smiled and said, Oh right, have you read the new book I sent you some time ago? What do you think? Boss, there's only one word, shocking. Lu Benji joked. Bullshit, that's only one word. Really, I feel that your level of writing is getting higher and higher. Lu Benji flattered without leaving a trace. When I first started reading this book, I thought it was a work similar to Prison Break, when I saw the prison. But as I read on, I felt that it was more like Journey in the White Night, or Relieving Grocery Store. It depicts human nature so deeply. No, it's not just that. Lu Benji said excitedly. It's more about people's desire for freedom. It's about the spirit of freedom that can never be erased from one setback after another. However, Yang Yi frowned and pressed Lu Benji to stop him from continuing. He then turned to look at the corner of the corridor. Who's eavesdropping there? Yang Yi stared at the corner and asked in a low voice. Although it wasn't a secret, being eavesdropped was still a very unpleasant thing. I'm sorry. A woman's voice was heard. Then Ewing, who was wearing a suit, walked out from the corner in embarrassment. Which department are you from? Who told you to skip work and come here to eavesdrop? Lu Benji, an honest man, was a little embarrassed and angry at the moment. Such a big mess had happened in front of his boss. If someone were to pursue the matter, it would be his fault for not being strict enough. Ewing was a little scared, but she didn't put herself in a lowly position. She pursed her lips and said, I'm not a staff member of the publishing house. I'm here to submit a manuscript today, an author. I want to apply for a children's book author support fund. If you want to submit a manuscript, you should go to the editorial department. Why are you here? Lu Benji asked suspiciously. Ewing had to tell Lu Benji and Yang Yi the reason why she was there. She said hesitantly, I just came out to use the bathroom. I didn't expect to hear you guys talking. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. It's just that I saw Yang Yi here, and I wanted to ask him some questions. In fact, Ewing didn't even think about asking Yang Yi the questions that she was worried about. How did she know that she would have the chance to meet Yang Yi? It was just that when she heard Yang Yi and Yang Yi's conversation, she stopped. Now, she could only brace herself and use the questions that she had asked and received answers to as an excuse. Yang Yi's face was a little better. When he heard that the other party was an author who came to submit a manuscript, and it seemed that she was a young married mother, he became a lot more amiable. What do you want to ask me? That's right, Mr. Yang. I want to know, this support fund that you set up, is it really to help us authors who have some of our own stories? Ewing was nervous and didn't know that there were some problems with her wording. Yang Yi didn't care. He smiled and said, Of course not. I have my own selfish motives. When I was interviewed before, I said that I hope that there will be more children's books in the market. Excellent works will appear. You are also a mother, right? Then you should be able to understand my thoughts. I want my daughter and my son to have books that are suitable for them to read when they grow up, so that their interest in reading can be fulfilled. When Ewing heard Yang Yi's sincere answer, She was already relieved. At this moment, she was completely relieved. Thank you, Mr. Yang. Actually, I was a little worried that it was a false advertisement at first, because I am. After Yuing breathed a sigh of relief, she excitedly told Yang Yi and Lu Benji about her journey from hesitation to courage to try these days. Yuing had also suppressed it for more than 2 weeks, and today she found a chance to vent it out. Yang Yi didn't interrupt. He listened patiently and said, Ms. Yu, we admire your courage. We understand that you must have put in a lot of effort in this process. It's not easy. However, our support fund won't be decided by me alone. I hope that it can really play its role and let more excellent children's books emerge. So on our editorial side, there will be a fair and just approval process. I can't interfere with the approval results. Speaking of this, Lu Benji also nodded to Yang Yi. Yuing saw that Yang Yi and the others misunderstood. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, I didn't mean that. Editor Wen Xiefeng has already told me this. I'm willing to follow the process. It's better to be fair. That's right. For Yuing, she was just looking forward to a real opportunity. She wasn't trying to get in through the back door. If she was such an unprincipled person, she would probably go out with some rich guests to drink and have fun. Ms. Yu, you're from Jiangcheng, right? Lu Benji interrupted and asked. My daughter and I have settled down in Jiangcheng. Yuing said quickly. Since you're in Jiangcheng, that's easy. Lu Benji smiled and said, Since Ms. Yu is so interested in children's literature, you can come to our place on Friday afternoon. Every Saturday, we will arrange for editors to teach some new authors for free. We also provide an opportunity for everyone to interact with each other. Regardless of whether you have passed the final approval, you can still participate. Friday afternoon. Yuing was happy at first, but she hesitated when she thought of the time. Finally, she gritted her teeth and said, I know. Thank you. I'll definitely come and learn when I'm free. Good luck. I wish you success. Yang Yi didn't take it to heart. He shook hands with Yuing and encouraged this young mother. Then he left with Lu Benji. Chapter 718. In the blink of an eye, The Fugitive had been screening for more than 10 days. Due to its good reputation, its daily box office continued to increase. Although the increase was not huge, it had already reached more than 20 million, placing it in third place. Originally, the cinema had only given The Fugitive 8% of the showtimes. Now they had quietly increased it to 15%. After all, although they were constrained by favors, who would say no to money in the face of benefits? The current results of The Fugitive were already considered good. There were already media outlets predicting that The Fugitive's box office would exceed 100 million before it was finished. However, they had still underestimated The Fugitive's potential. Many movie fans had not even seen The Fugitive yet. Like Jin Yuan, he was considered a veteran movie fan. In his opinion, good movies rarely screened during the off-season. The real seasons for box office sales were the New Year's and summer holidays. Of course, there were also a few small climaxes during the long holidays. During this time, the cinemas were crowded with big movies, and the audience was also crowded together. In the off-season, the audience was busy with work, and there were fewer good movies. Jin Yuan usually only watched the most popular movies, such as the box office #1 Destined Adventure or The Fugitive. He didn't even bother to look at the movie posters. However, Jin Yuan did not go home after work. Instead, he appeared in the cinema and bought a movie ticket for The Fugitive. It all started with the Ultimate Challenge the night before. Jin Yuan had originally watched the Ultimate Challenge because of Dan Hongkue, but after the other 5 people became fans of the show in the first episode, Jin Yuan became obsessed with the show. Almost every episode he had to stay in front of the TV, waiting to see how the 2 old foxes, Yuan Yan and Dan Hongkue, would toy with the other 4 members. The 3rd episode aired the night before. Jin Yuan even bought some sunflower seeds and tuned to Shanghai TV station on time. There's a guest this episode? Hey, isn't that Su Sanduo? When Jin Yuan saw Yang Yi and Geng Sha appear, he recognized Geng Sha at first glance. Then after the introduction, he found out that Yang Yi was the designer of the ultimate challenge. Jin Yuan wasn't that interested in music. He had heard of Yang Yi before, but he didn't know him. So at the beginning he didn't have much interest in the movie The Fugitive, which was played by Yang Yi, Geng Sha, and Guizi. The grouping of the SWAT team and the fugitive team surprised Jin Yuan. Why were Dan Hongkui and Yuan Yan in the same group? If that was the case, how were the others supposed to play? The editing of the show was, of course, not carried out according to the progress of the overall story. Yen Tao and Ren Xia had evilly hidden the part where Dan Hongkui was chosen as the mole. Even some of the things he secretly did for the fugitive team were edited out and left for the end. This made the audience unable to determine Dan Hongkui's identity. They only knew that there was a mole in the fugitive team, and that was Zhu Jia. Jin Yuan looked at the TV. Yang Yi didn't notice it at first, but when he found out that Zhu Jia was a big idiot, he decided to beat him at his own game and used Zhu Jia to mislead the SWAT team. This scene made him dumbfounded. You can play like this? Of course, the episode where Yang Yi was punished at the headquarters in order to save Guizi made Jin Yuan laugh out loud. While admiring Yang Yi's memory and drawing skills, he was also impressed by the show's bad taste. Yen Tao and the others even boldly edited Murphy, who was watching the show, into the show, telling the audience that Yang Yi's wife was just beside him. Poor Yang Yi. I'm afraid he'll have to kneel on the washboard when he goes back tonight. Jin Yuan and many others thought so. Then, Yang Yi calmly commanded and set up a trap. Compared to Yuan Yan's sharp eyes, it formed a sharp contrast. Jin Yuan couldn't help but exclaim, "There's still someone in this world who can compete with Yuan Yan?" Yes, seeing this, Jin Yuan felt that this episode was destined to be a showdown between Yang Yi and Yuan Yan. Zhuge Liang and Sima Yi's IQ PK. However, when Jin Yuan saw Yang Yi fail miserably in front of his sister, he was amused and angry. Of course, he also admired the show's authenticity. Yang Yi's elimination had made the show less exciting, and the final showdown between the two old foxes had become nothing more than a bubble. However, Jin Yuan wanted to watch a reality show that was real, not a script written for him by those writers. After Yang Yi was eliminated, Jin Yuan felt that the fugitive team was going to lose. However, he didn't expect Yuan Yan to fall into the trap set by Yang Yi before he was eliminated. Seeing Yuan Yan and Yang Yi's verbal exchange in prison, Jin Yuan felt that Yang Yi hadn't been eliminated yet, and that he was still in control. However, there was a twist in the plot. Yuan Yan had a trick up his sleeve. They could go to the final mission location to snipe the remaining two members of the fugitive team. It looked like the fugitive team was going to lose. Jin Yuan felt that it was a pity. However, he saw that the crew wasn't in a hurry to show the final showdown. Instead, they showed Yang Yi in prison, leisurely holding the two children and talking to Yang Huan. Could there be a twist? Jin Yuan didn't know what to think until the end, when Dan Hongkui picked up the gun that Guizi dropped and eliminated Yuan Yan and Geng Sha as a mole. It turned out that Dan Hongkui was the hidden big boss. No wonder he purposely allowed himself to be captured by Yang Yi. No wonder he wasn't as proactive as Guizi when he was dealing with Guizi. No wonder he purposely didn't chase after him and let Jie Yuchen go. A lot of things that didn't make sense before now made sense. Of course, after watching this episode, Jin Yuan was completely a fan of Yang Yi. A fugitive with a high IQ was no worse than Yuan Yan. Jin Yuan felt that he should support the movie that Yang Yi and the others were promoting. So Jin Yuan went to the cinema. Like many other viewers, he wanted to see what the movie was all about. After the movie started, Jin Yuan was surprised to see Yang Yi appear on screen. This was because the Yang Yi in the movie was a little old, and seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life. He was completely different from the wise and young Yang Yi on TV. He has some acting skills after all. With this thought in mind, Jin Yuan watched as Rudy was sent to the bank by police officer Du Jiang. At this moment, he realized that police officer Du Jiang was played by Guizi. He had also put on old makeup. Xiaoguo's acting is not bad, but perhaps it would be more suitable for Jie Yuchen to play this role. Then a series of things happened at the bank, which made Jin Yuan dumbfounded. Geng Sha's clumsy performance during the bank robbery made people convulse with laughter, especially when the short special actor, teacher Sha Huayan, appeared from behind the counter. He tried his best to jump on the ground, trying to grab the luggage that was hanging on the lampstand. The contrast was too great. But Jin Yuan was also worried about Yang Yi's Lidi. This guy was innocent. The rest of the story was smoother. Lidi was tricked by Wang Li, and the two of them escaped the police's pursuit. Then, Wang Li brought Lidi to the vet. The movie's plot was full of humor. Jin Yuan did not find it boring, and there was laughter in the cinema from time to time. Until Wang Mai appeared. Jin Yuan recognized her. This little girl. Wasn't she the daughter that Yang Yi was carrying in the show yesterday? How did she become Geng Sha's daughter? Also, how did the originally lively and cute little girl become an introverted, autistic and pitiful little girl? Of course, this was just a movie. However, just like the rest of the audience, when Jin Yuan saw Cici, who had long, smooth hair and was dressed in a neat school uniform, he could not help but fall in love with this little girl with a melancholy gaze and tightly closed lips. The most classic scene in the movie was when Lidi, who was played by Yang Yi, collapsed in the abandoned factory. Shi, who was played by Wang Mai, watched from behind for a while, then walked over timidly. Wang Mai looked at Lidi, who was lying on the ground with a pale face. Then, she curled up in front of Lidi and lay down. Oh! Jin Yuan could not help but exclaim, just like the rest of the audience. The scene of Wang Mai, who was wearing a clean school uniform and lying on the dirty ground, was too heart-wrenching. Of course, this scene was too loving. Jin Yuan, who was a big man, could not help but feel that his heart was about to melt. After watching the movie, Jin Yuan's mind kept replaying this scene. After he walked out, he found a fast food restaurant and could not help but pick up his phone to post a movie review online, recommending this unpopular masterpiece. Then, he saw a movie review that was highly recommended. Did you really understand the ending of this movie? This fan told everyone that this movie had elements that they needed to pay attention to. Not only was there the beloved Wang Mai, there was also a series of funny scenes where Lidi was tricked by Wang Li. There should also be Yang Yi's meticulous design of the script. There were many details that needed to be scrutinized, but the most important one was the ending of the movie. This fan said that at first, he also thought that this story would have a tragic ending, but after thinking about it carefully, he realized that there was a deeper meaning to it. Wang Li was caught by the real robbers and police officer Du Jiang appeared again. For his daughter, Wang Li might have redeemed himself by doing good deeds, and Du Jiang might have finally understood Lidi's difficulties. Therefore, the ending that Yang Yi did not completely reveal should be a good one. Wang Mai did not need to follow her father to the end of the world. Jin Yuan looked at the analysis of this movie review and suddenly felt that he should go back and buy another movie ticket to watch this movie again. Finally, The Fugitive ushered in its popularity and box office explosion. Chapter 719. After the latest episode was aired, The Fugitive's box office exploded. Within 2 days, its daily box office doubled, and was second only to the big production Destiny. Destiny had been in theaters for almost a month, so its box office potential was exhausted. When the weekend came, The Fugitive overtook Destiny and took first place with more than 50 million yuan in the box office. This time, the proud filmmakers finally took this movie seriously for the first time. The media reported on The Fugitive's counterattack, and with the good reputation it had accumulated, more people who heard about the movie for the first time were finally willing to go to the cinema to watch it. Even during the off-season, even during the working week, The Fugitive was able to maintain a high box office and firmly ranked first. However, The Fugitive's quiet popularity also made the two actors, Geng Sha and Guizi, walk into the eyes of many directors. Yang Yi did not know about Geng Sha, but on Guizi's side, it was said that Ding Xiang had to help him deal with many audition invitations every day. Of course, Guizi was still filming Fat Agent, a movie that he starred in, so he could not adjust his schedule for the time being. Ding Xiang and Guizi were both smart people, so they did not let the popularity get to their heads. They carefully selected the scripts and rejected the ones that were not suitable. Ding Xiang would help Guizi negotiate with the producers to postpone the audition for the suitable scripts. As one of the main actors, Yang Yi was also targeted by many directors. However, he did not plan to continue filming, so they were all rejected by Mo Xiaowan. However, compared to Xixi, Yang Yi, Geng Sha, and Guizi were not considered popular. The long-haired, well-behaved, and melancholy little girl in the movie was liked by everyone. Whether the audience liked the movie or not, they could not resist Xixi's charm. This could be seen from the increasing number of fans calling Yang Yi father-in-law on micro-broadcasting. At first, Yang Yi did not care. He was a little puzzled. If you like a little girl character, shouldn't you treat her as your daughter or sister? Why do you all treat her as your wife? For this reason, Yang Yi even jokingly replied, "Little brats who call me father-in-law. This old man's butcher knife has already been sharpened." Unexpectedly, there were even more people calling him father-in-law now. This hot trend made him appear on micro-broadcasting's hot search. Of course, no matter how much Yang Yi cared, he couldn't do anything to these people. After all, their mouths were on other people's bodies. Xixi also received many invitations for movies and TV shows. She even received invitations for variety shows. Even Murphy's good friend, Sister Luo Xian, jokingly wanted to invite Xixi to appear on Jixin interview. Of course, Yang Yi would not agree. He wanted his daughter to stay away from the entertainment industry for the time being, and let Xixi's popularity in the media drop. Therefore, all the invitations were turned down. In Xixi's eyes, the little girl had no idea that she already had a lot of enthusiastic fans. She was still an ordinary kindergarten student. Every day, she happily went to kindergarten to play with her friends. Then every day, she would come back happily to play with her parents and brother. Today, it was another Friday. In the afternoon, Yang Yi picked up Xixi from kindergarten. The little girl was holding an envelope from her teacher. "Mom, this is for you." As her father was busy watering the garden in the yard, Xixi went back to the house by herself and happily stuffed the envelope into her mother's hands. "What is this?" Murphy asked curiously. "The teacher gave this to Mom and Papa. Papa said that we can't read other people's letters." Although Xixi said so, she still clung to the armrest of the sofa and hung half of her body on it. She mischievously jumped up and down and looked at the envelope in her mother's hands with her big eyes. Obviously, she was also eager to know the contents of the envelope. Murphy thought that Xixi was being naughty in kindergarten, and that it was a complaint letter from the teacher. However, after opening it, Murphy could not help but read it aloud. "Dear Dad and Mom, in our daily life, do you also have a lot of old and discarded items that you don't know how to deal with, such as beautiful packaging boxes, last year's old calendars, small toys that children are tired of playing with, and so on? In fact, many old and discarded items can be made into beautiful handicrafts as long as they are slightly processed. This is not only environmentally friendly and economical, but also can let children develop good habits of being thrifty and simple, and caring for the environment from a young age. So, please collect the old and discarded items at home with your children. Next Monday afternoon, we will hold a parent-child activity with the theme of turning waste into treasure, low carbon and environmental protection. Let's make handicrafts with old and discarded items as materials." "So that's it." Xixi listened to her mother and understood. The little girl smiled and said, "I know, Mom, Teacher Kai is very awesome." She drew a very strange picture. "It's not a picture, it's a shoe, and the shoe is like a person. It has eyes and a big mouth." Xixi was a little short of vocabulary to describe a handicraft painting out of thin air, but the little girl still tried her best to describe it. She gesticulated with her hands and feet, and was very serious. "This is hair made from shoelaces, and it even flew up, hee." Although she did not know what Xixi was talking about, Murphy could not help but laugh when she saw how funny it was and how happy she herself was. Teacher Kai said that it was a shoe that was not worn, so she made use of the waste. Finally, the little girl echoed the theme and finished. It was rare that she learned the phrase, making use of waste, from her teacher. Then what kind of handicrafts are we going to make? How much waste do we need? What kind of waste do we need? Murphy asked. At this moment, Xixi was at her wit's end. She blinked her big eyes innocently and said, "I don't know either." Why did she ask Shishi? Shishi was a child. If Shishi knew how to complain, she would definitely say so. Your papa throws away all the waste items in the house, so we don't know where to find the waste items in the house, Murphy said helplessly. Indeed, with Yang Yi a quasi-obsessive compulsive patient, their villa was the cleanest. Then what should we do? Shishi supported herself on the armrest of the sofa. Like her mother, she rested her chin on her hand and began to worry. However, the definition of waste items was very vague. Yang Yi came back from watering the flower bed outside. After hearing Murphy talk about the task given by the kindergarten, he said with a smile, "There are, who said that there aren't? There are 2 pairs of shoes that I can't wear anymore. I didn't throw them away. This is a waste item, right? Today, we received a few express delivery boxes from Sahara Express. This is also a waste item. There is also a milk powder can. We can also clean this can after we pour out the milk powder. Wow, Dad is so awesome." Shishi looked at her father with admiration. She felt that her father could solve any problem. Her father was really omnipotent. Yang Yi glanced at his daughter's big eyes and continued proudly, "Shishi, there is also the yogurt box that you finished. Although I threw away the previous ones, there is still tomorrow's and the day after tomorrow's, right? It was just a waste item." If he really couldn't find it, Yang Yi could go to the coffee shop or Yang Huan's house and find a lot of waste items. Chapter 720. On Saturday morning, the rainy Jiangqing welcomed a rare sunny weekend. The weather was surprisingly good. The white clouds were like torn cotton candy, and a few thin pieces floated lazily under the light blue sky. The warm sunlight shone brightly on the ground, as if everything was covered in a layer of luster. The grass and leaves in the courtyard were emerald green, and the flower beds that had just been planted a month ago were colorful. Even the windows of the villa were like glass that refracted the colorful light. With such good weather, it was only natural for people to be in a good mood. "Haha, Papa, I want to wash my shoes too." Shishi's sweet laughter came from the open door. All the doors and windows of the villa were open today. Usually when the heater was on, the doors and windows were closed. Although there was air exchange, the air was turbid after a long time. Moreover, the continuous spring rain had also produced some damp mildew. Today was a good day for cleaning, so Yang Yi and Murphy opened all the doors and windows to get some fresh air. Passing by the loyal steamed stuffed bun at the door, they saw a little girl running happily. Shishi's dress today was very interesting. She wore her pink water boots with cartoon patterns on them, and she wore light yellow rubber gloves loosely on her hands. The rubber gloves were for adults, and Yang Yi bought them according to his size. For Shishi, they were a little too big, and the mouth of the gloves almost covered her elbows. However, Shishi didn't care at all. She raised her 2 forearms to prevent them from falling down. Even so, the little girl ran happily to her father like the wind. "Aren't you going to help your mother clean the sheets and quilt to wash? Papa doesn't need your help here," Yang Yi said with a smile. He was brushing his shoes. At first he only wanted to brush the 2 pairs of shoes that Xiao Xiaotang could not wear. Later he simply took the other washable shoes in the house and washed them, taking advantage of the good weather to dry them. Mom said that she wanted to use the washing machine, so she didn't need my help. Then he gave me this. Shishi happily waved her little hand, and showed her father the rubber gloves she was wearing. Yang Yi saw that his daughter was so eager to help, so he didn't refuse. He took a small stool for Shishi to sit on, and then the father and daughter squatted in the toilet to scrub their shoes. "Grab the heels of your shoes and brush the soles. Once you rinse them with water, the dirt will be gone," Yang Yi demonstrated to his daughter. Shishi looked at her father's operation with her big bright eyes, and she imitated him. The little girl picked up a pair of her mother's slippers with one hand, and gripped the long handle of the brush awkwardly with the other. She started brushing with difficulty. "Don't you think it'll be easier to control them if you grab them here?" Yang Yi realized that Shishi was different from him. The little girl's hands were not as long, and she was not as nimble when using the brush. Therefore, he taught her how to hold the middle of the handle. Shishi started brushing her mother's slippers again. But this time, she realized that it wasn't as strenuous as before. The little girl couldn't help but turn her head in surprise and said to her father, "It's true." Yang Yi took the hose and rinsed it on his daughter's shoes. At the same time he smiled and said, "Right? Daddy will tell you a fun story, okay?" "Okay." Shishi replied happily. Shishi stopped what she was doing, because she wanted to listen to her father's story. She held the slippers in one hand and the brush in the other, but she looked at her father curiously. Yang Yi turned off the hose and said, "A long time ago, there was a man who wanted to go out of the city with a long flagpole. When he passed by the city gate, he realized that his flagpole was too long and couldn't pass through the gate. What should he do?" Yang Yi told the story. In order to describe it more vividly, he used a brush and a plastic bucket as an analogy. The long brush was the flagpole, and the opening of the plastic bucket was the city gate. Therefore, looking at her father's gestures and the brush stuck in the opening of the plastic bucket, although she didn't really understand what the city gate was like, she still had a general impression of the gate and the plastic bucket. The little girl giggled. She grabbed her brush and stuck it into the bucket vertically. She said, "I can put it in like this." "That's right." Yang Yi snapped his fingers and praised, "Shishi, you're too smart." Shishi smiled embarrassedly. Yang Yi continued, "But that man was stupid. He didn't think that he could bring the flagpole out by changing the angle. He sat there and sulked." Later an old man came. When he heard about this, he told the man that he could cut the flagpole, and then bring it out. Shishi saw her father gesturing in the middle of the brush. Her brain was very flexible, and she immediately formed a corresponding image. She said in surprise, "That's possible." "Well, it's not wrong to do that, because the flagpoles at that time were all made of bamboo. But there's a problem." Yang Yi said, "After the flagpole is cut, it can't be used as a flagpole. If the brush is broken, it won't be as useful as before." Shishi was a little confused by her father's reversal. She looked at him in confusion. "Then what should we do?" "So it's good to use the method you just said. You can bring the flagpole out of the city gate in good condition," Yang Yi said with a smile. "This story tells us that there are many ways to deal with a problem. We should be flexible and learn to find the most energy-efficient way to solve the problem. It's like if you feel that holding the brush like this isn't useful, you can change the way you hold it. There must be a way that suits you. Isn't that right?" Shishi understood this time. She replied sweetly, "Yes." He continued to scrub the shoes. The little girl felt that the slipper she had just washed was clean, so she changed to the other slipper. Seeing this, Yang Yi quietly reached over and took the slipper that Shishi had just put down. He started to scrub it again. Yang Yi felt that it was already very rare that Shishi was willing to help her parents. He didn't want to use his strict standards to scare away his daughter's enthusiasm. After an unknown amount of time, Yang Yi took Shishi to the yard with the clean shoes and other old things that they were going to bring to the kindergarten to dry. The father and daughter were busy when Steamed Bun, who was sunbathing at the side, suddenly stood up. However, he sniffed with his nose and slowly lay down again, but his eyes were still looking towards the yard gate. After a while, Lance Hao Kai's chubby figure appeared at the gate. Accompanying him was Lan Xian's cheerful call, "Shishi." Xian air. The little girl turned her head in surprise. The two young ladies gathered together and naturally started to chat and laugh as they played. With a companion, Shishi didn't have time to help her father with his work. Boss Lan, who lived like a princess, had a nanny at home and didn't do any household chores herself. At this time, she was also standing beside Yang Yi, watching Yang Yi hang the shoes on the clothes rack while chatting with Yang Yi. There was already a substantial breakthrough in the negotiations for the piece of land in Jinling City. Both sides had reached an agreement on the price, and only the final signing was left. It had to be said that Lance Hao Kai was very capable in the area of real estate. In the few months that Lance Hao Kai was in Jinling City, not only did he negotiate with the Wuqing County government for the piece of land that Yang Yi wanted, he also negotiated for a few hundred mu of construction land that hadn't been requisitioned yet. Lance Hao Kai told Yang Yi that even if he couldn't use the land for the amusement park, he could use it for commercial development. He could build shopping malls and hotels around the amusement park, rent them out and sell them. He could make a lot of money. Of course, he was still waiting for the submission of the report, the approval of the Jiangnam Provincial Department, and the final signing. Lan Kai came back this time, because he wanted to take some time to attend his daughter's parent-child activity. You didn't come here today to ask me for old things, did you? Yang Yi looked at Lan Kai vigilantly. This guy realized that he was very good at educating his children. He often left Lan Xian here, and asked Yang Yi to tutor Lan Xian for some math homework. Sometimes, Yang Yi really wanted to ask him, "Is Xian your daughter or my daughter?" Of course, this was just a joke. Yang Yi and Lan Kai's families had a good relationship. Yang Yi could be considered Lan Xian's godfather. It was just that Yang Yi and Lan Kai weren't religious, so they didn't have the habit of calling each other strange names. Lan Kai said with a smile, "We don't need old things. Our family has asked Grandma Wu to clean up a batch. But by the way, on Monday, after you finish Xishi's handicrafts, don't forget to come and help Xian, or we can do it together. You know I don't have any talent in handicrafts." "Then what did you want to talk to me about?" Yang Yi asked curiously. "About the school. Xian and Xishi will go to primary school in the second half of the year. Should we also consider which primary school to choose for our children?" Lan Kai really had something important to talk to Yang Yi. Chapter 721. Yang Yi had never thought about choosing a school for Xishi. He had never been to a school in his previous life. In this life, although Yang Yi had studied in high school, he had never thought about choosing a school. Yang Yi had studied in the village school when he was in primary school. After that, he had studied in the town. His grades had been worse than Yang Huan's, so Yang Yi had been able to study in the county high school. Of course, he had joined the army halfway through his studies. But now Lan Kai was telling him where to go to primary school. For parents like them, this was a question that was worth researching. It was just like choosing a kindergarten. Every school was of a different standard and had different characteristics. Your sister-in-law originally wanted to send her to Harbor City. The schools in Harbor City are really good. Lan Kai said. Not Harbor City. She will study in Jiang City. Yang Yi shook his head decisively. To be honest, after Lan Kai's introduction, Yang Yi had roughly understood his own standards. The schools were good, but Yang Yi didn't care how good the schools were. Therefore, in Yang Yi's opinion, there was no need to send Xishi to Harbor City. Their home was in Jiang City, and it was enough for them to study in Jiang City. I knew you would think like this. Lan Kai laughed and said, I also told your sister-in-law that you are willing to leave Xian in Harbor City, where she is not familiar with anyone. Then your sister-in-law and I thought that Xishi and Xian's relationship is very good. So, we might as well let them go to primary school together. The two children will have company. Lan Kai didn't just say that. He also waved his hand to call Lan Xian and Xishi over. He said with a smile, Xishi, if you and Xian go to primary school together, you will be in the same class. What do you think? Hearing this, Xishi asked in confusion. I'm in the same class as Xian. What Uncle Lan means is that you're about to graduate from kindergarten. When you go to primary school, Uncle Lan will arrange for you to be in the same class, so that you can continue to be classmates. Yang Yi explained with a smile. I want to be with Xishi. Lan Xian obviously didn't quite understand. She inexplicably felt a sense of crisis and hurriedly shouted. Hee, yes, I want to be with Xian. Xishi understood, but she was affected by Lan Xian's emotions. She hugged Lan Xian and called out happily. Look, how close are the two kids? Lan Kai tried to tempt Yang Yi. Actually, Lan Kai didn't need to prove it. Yang Yi was also very happy to see Xishi and Lan Xian, two good friends, go to school and grow up together. Letting the two little guys continue to play, Yang Yi and Lan Kai went back to the living room to continue chatting. What good choices do you have? Tell me about them, Yang Yi said to Lan Kai with a smile. Murphy came over with a teapot and sat beside Yang Yi. She poured tea for Yang Yi and Lan Kai. She had already finished her chores long ago. The sheets were still being washed in the washing machine, so she wasn't in a hurry. Look, you're a big man. You didn't even hire a nanny. What did you do to a big celebrity? Lance Hao Kai said jokingly. Murphy, this is my first time drinking tea brewed by a celebrity. I can tell. Big Brother Lon is indirectly saying that I was too lazy in the past, and didn't even know how to brew tea. Murphy said with a smile. In the past, Murphy really didn't know how to brew tea, or rather, she didn't want to learn. But now, in order to lose weight, she followed Yang Yi's advice and drank tea often to clear her stomach, so she learned how to brew tea herself. After she learned, she even proudly told Yang Yi how easy it was. Haha, I'm just kidding. But you really don't have a nanny in your house. That's a bit bad. Lance Hao Kai said. Do you want to hire a nanny? I can introduce one to you. It's better for someone familiar to be your nanny. No need to trouble Big Brother Lon. Actually, if we really wanted to hire a nanny, when I lived in Binhai, I had a nanny I was familiar with. Murphy was referring to Auntie Zhu. She smiled and said, but we still feel that we should give Shishi a more thrifty environment. We don't want her to live a life where she has to stretch out her hand and open her mouth. That way she'll develop bad habits. Of course, the cleaning work in Yang Yi's house was not entirely done by them. They still hired a professional villa cleaning company to come to the villa once a week to do a big cleaning, as well as trimming the grass and shrubs in the yard, cleaning the swimming pool, and so on. With so much work, if they finished it themselves, they wouldn't have time to care about other things. Lance Hao Kai nodded in agreement with Murphy's point of view. However, they had no choice but to have a nanny in their house. Otherwise, there would be no one to cook for them. That's why I want to let Xi and Air and Shishi go to school together. Lance Hao Kai smiled and said. Isn't there a saying that one is marked by the company one keeps? After chatting for a while, Lance Hao Kai took out his mobile phone, but he had to put on his glasses first. Then he swiped and found some information about private schools that his secretary had sent him. He introduced them to Yang Yi and Murphy. Shuejing Primary School. This is the nearest private primary school near us. It's near the villa area. A few of the boss's children are studying in this school. But I have never asked if it's good. Edmond Primary School. It's a Sino-foreign joint venture private primary school. Although it's a Sino-foreign joint venture, my acquaintances told me that the school's environment is too bad. It's mainly because it's small. There are only 2 teaching buildings and a playground. I don't recommend you to consider this school. Huijia Primary School. This old school has a good reputation. You have to go through an interview to get into this school. Both parents and children have to go through the interview to get into this school. Even someone of my status can't get in through the back door. Don't you think it's amazing? But it's true that many people say this school is good. But it's in Wuhu district, which is in the old city area. It's a bit far. Also, the threshold is too low for us. It's a bit degrading. Let's not consider this school first. This school's name was quite nice. When Lance Hao Kai showed Yang Yi and the rest the photos, Murphy looked at them with interest. Your sister-in-law and I are very interested in this school. It's Jiangcheng Wang Mansion School. Lance Hao Kai smiled. Let's not talk about this school's background. Its teaching staff is definitely the best. The teachers there are all special teachers from the top public schools in the country. And it's not just a primary school. It teaches from elementary school to high school. As long as you're willing, it can teach all the way until your child goes to university. The school's environment is not bad. It's on the other side of Tingshan district. It's near a mountain and a river. There are a few football fields. I've been there before. It's as beautiful as a paradise. Lance Hao Kai said with admiration. And not just anyone can go to this school. Its annual tuition is 200,000. 200,000. Murphy couldn't help but exclaim. Of course, to Murphy, 200,000 was just a number. But she found it strange. It was just a primary school. Why was the tuition so high? What did the children read there? Were they books made of gold? Lance Hao Kai understood Murphy's confusion. He smiled and said, that's normal. Aristocratic schools have very high tuition fees. Otherwise, why would I say that Huijia Primary School's threshold is too low? Huijia is indeed very good. But its annual tuition fee is only about 20,000. Children from ordinary families can also go there. Wang Mansion is different. The children who study there are either rich or respectable. Many of the famous business people in Jiangqing that I know also have their children studying in Wang Mansion. If Xixi and Xian Air study in Wang Mansion, it's a good way for them to accumulate connections. Hearing Lan Caokai's words, Yang Yi frowned slightly. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't think of anything at the moment. Lan Caokai spent a lot of time introducing Wang Mansion's school. However, he didn't stop there. Instead, he continued to talk about other private primary schools. Lan Caokai's secretary had indeed done his best to search for many excellent private primary schools in Jiangqing for his boss to choose from. It's useless for us to talk too much now. Brother Yang on Monday will participate in the children's parent-child activities. On Tuesday, you'll come with me to do a field trip. How about that? Murphy, are you going? If you're going, I'll bring your sister-in-law along too. You two can accompany each other. Lan Caokai said with a smile. Lan Caokai was indeed more interested in Wang Mansion's school. However, he didn't say anything definite. Boss Lan was a smart man. Moreover, his intelligence lay in his ability to read people. He knew that Yang Yi was good at teaching children. Moreover, he trusted Yang Yi's foresight. This could be seen from his business investments. Rather than letting Lan Caokai make the decision himself, it was better to ask for Yang Yi's opinion. If he followed Yang Yi, they could quietly make a fortune together in business. They would also be less worried about their children's education. Take Lan Xian for example. After meeting Xixi, how much better was her personality? In the past, Lan Xian was a spoiled little princess. Although she was very kind, she had a bad temper. Now she was much gentler and knew how to share and be grateful. As for the school his daughter was going to study in the future, regardless of whether it was an elite primary school or not, Yang Yi felt that it was necessary to do a field trip. Therefore, he and Murphy looked at each other and nodded. Chapter 722. On Monday, Yang Yi and Murphy went out together to participate in Xixi kindergarten's parent-child activity. Murphy had always wanted to participate in her daughter's activities. However, most of the time, she could only watch Yang Yi go and envy him from behind. It was either because she had not been exposed by the media back then, and was worried that her identity would cause trouble for her daughter's normal life, or because she was pregnant, and it was inconvenient. She could only watch from the sidelines. In fact, Murphy had received an invitation from the kindergarten last year to tell the children about her road to fame. It was just like the speech Yang Yi gave when she was still in middle class. Murphy was very willing to tell stories in front of her daughter and her classmates. However, she was already several months pregnant at that time, and could only decline. This time, Murphy wanted to go to the parent-child activity organized by Springfield Kindergarten. Now that Xixi was already a big star, what was there to worry about? Yang Yi was carefree. He had a new book launched today, but he threw all the work to Sahara Publishing House. He did not care at all, and threw himself into the production of handicrafts. Of course, Yang Yi knew that his book's story was exciting, and it was expected that it would become popular. Even if it did not become popular, his ultimate goal was not to write a book. In the future, it would be made into a movie and it would naturally shine. Mu Yuqing was queuing up again. What are you buying today? What else could it be? Yang Yi's new book is on the market today. Of course, I'm buying his book. Aren't you? Hee hee. It was Monday when he had to go to work, but Mu Yuqing took half a day off and went to a shopping mall near his home early. He queued up in front of the bookstore of Love to Read, waiting to buy Yang Yi's new book. In fact, Mu Yuqing was also crazy. He had already ordered the book online in advance, but he still liked to queue up at the bookstore. Perhaps it was because he had a good experience queuing up last time, so he wanted to do it again? Although waiting in line at the entrance of the bookstore was tiring, Mu Yuqing liked this feeling. He could hear the whispers of the readers in front of him, and hear them praise Yang Yi. As a die-hard fan, Mu Yuqing also felt honored. Then again, looking at this big bookstore now, Mu Yuqing remembered that under Yang Yi's personal page, there was a post that an insider had made. It was said that when Yang Yi's 2 books, Soldier Assault and Drawing Sword, were sold physically, chain bookstores such as Love Reading, Book Bar, and Book Pavilion looked down on the works of this newbie web author. Later, both Soldier Assault and Drawing Sword were sold out and became one of the best sellers of the year. Naturally, these major bookstore chains regretted it. The insider was an employee of the promotion department of the Book Bar chain bookstore who had already left. He vividly described how his department manager sighed at that time. Of course, this was all in the past. Now almost every book by Yang Yi could squeeze into the bestseller list. He had become synonymous with quality and sales. The major bookstore chains that would not go against money would naturally not look down on Yang Yi. Instead, they actively cooperated with Sahara Publishing and placed Yang Yi's books in the most conspicuous position. Now Mu Yuqing walked into Love Reading bookstore and picked up Yang Yi's new work from the mountain of books stacked in the large open space inside the main entrance. He felt a sense of pride in his heart. But why is this book so thin? Mu Yuqing pinched the hardcover book that was probably only about 100 pages after removing the thickness of the cover. He muttered a little. The Shawshank Redemption. Is this a novella? After paying the bill at the front desk, Mu Yuqing found a coffee shop, opened the plastic film, and couldn't wait to read it. I guess there are people like me in every provincial prison and national prison in China. When he saw the opening, Mu Yuqing was dumbfounded. How could it be a first-person narrative? But prison again. Mu Yuqing couldn't help but feel his blood boil. Could this be a Prison Break story again? Mu Yuqing felt that he really loved Prison Break. After Yang Yi, countless people followed the trend and wrote similar Prison Break stories on Kaiwechini's network, but none of them could write a good story. Mu Yuqing felt that with Yang Yi's work in front of them, other people's works, he really couldn't continue reading. The Shawshank Redemption. Could it be Yang Yi's new prison novel? Could it surpass the classic Prison Break? Mu Yuqing read on with such anticipation. The name The Shawshank Redemption at first made Mu Yuqing think that Shawshank should be the name of the protagonist, but not long after, he was at a loss. The protagonist in the first-person narrative was called Fu Rueda, and the real protagonist in the story he narrated was called Andy. The damn prison's name was Shawshank. Why was the name of the book Shawshank Redemption? And not Andy's Redemption or Fu Rueda's Redemption? Mu Yuqing read the book very quickly. Yes, although he read it very carefully, the book was not very long, and the plot progressed very quickly. The pace was tight, the concept was tight, and there was no filler. When Yang Yi rewrote this book, a story that he liked very much in his previous life, he combined the original novel and the movie. The content was slightly increased, but it was still within a reasonable range. Mu Yuqing didn't know how long he read, but it definitely didn't take long. He was almost at the end of the book. He saw that on the night when Fu Rueda thought he was going to commit suicide, Andy suddenly seemed to evaporate into thin air and disappeared from Shawshank Prison. Mu Yuqing was shocked, especially when he saw the warden inadvertently discover the hole that Andy had spent nearly 20 years digging. Mu Yuqing finally understood. It was a prison break. Mu Yuqing was convinced. Although he had a faint premonition when he saw Andy and Fu Rueda buying a small hammer in the book, when he saw what Andy did in Shawshank Prison, he felt that this person wouldn't break out of prison. He didn't expect Andy to have such a meticulous and long-term plan. Mu Yuqing vaguely understood why Yang Yi wanted to use Fu Rueda's perspective to write the whole story. Only in this way could the suddenness and unexpected nature of the matter be vividly reflected. If the readers knew everything from God's perspective, then the story might become tacky. Wait, why do I feel that a prison break is tacky? Mu Yuqing was shocked. He realized that he had unknowingly replaced Prison Break in his heart with this unremarkable novel. The story that happened at the end of Shawshank Redemption still tugged at Mu Yuqing's heartstrings, but at this moment, Mu Yuqing remembered Andy's escape even more deeply. After Mu Yuqing closed the book, he breathed a long sigh of relief. Although there was a lot of reluctance, after reading such a book, Mu Yuqing felt a sense of satisfaction after an orgasm. Such a story was like a mole in his heart that could not be removed, and would always be blocked there. It was also like a pot of fragrant tea that left a lasting aftertaste. Mu Yuqing couldn't help but turn on his mobile phone and find the group of book friends to see what they thought after reading the book. In order not to reveal spoilers, someone set up a small discussion group to chat after reading the book. After Mu Yuqing joined, he saw a group of people shouting excitedly, "A work of the gods, an absolute work of the gods. With this book by Master Yang Yi, I'm afraid no one in the literary world will dare to question his status." Xiongdi, did you eat Master Yang Yi's Journey in the White Night and Relieving Grocery Store? There's also Soldier's Assault, Drawing Sword, and so on. Aren't those books also works of the gods? It's different. I think the depth of thought expressed in Shawshank Redemption is a level higher. I agree with that. Look at the sentences in Master Yang's book. It really makes my scalp tingle. The book friend could not help but select and type. You know, some birds are destined not to be locked in a cage. Every feather of theirs shines with the glory of freedom. Is there? When I saw this sentence, I felt like jumping off a dozen floors. I want to fly, I want to be free. Haha, the person above is crazy. I also have a sentence here. These walls are interesting. When you first enter prison, you hate the high walls around you. Slowly, you get used to living in them. Eventually, you find yourself having to rely on them to survive. This is called institutionalization. There's also this. Fear makes you a prisoner, hope makes you free. Wait, I remember there's another paragraph. That's right. This I, too, have once endured a long, lonely night, thinking about all sorts of things by myself. Time was as slow as a knife. That was the longest night of my life. After reading it, I feel that many of the sentences in this book are as beautiful as poems. My favorite is this sentence. The strong save themselves, the saints save others. Damn, when I saw this sentence, I wanted to copy it down and make it my life's motto. Looking at their chat, Mu Yuqing suddenly realized that he had been so focused on the development of the story that he had missed out on so many wonderful details. Old Mu, you finished reading it too? Hurry up and tell us your thoughts. Someone called out to him. I've finished reading it, but I still don't think it's enough. Mu Yuqing emotionally typed a line of words and replied. After reading what you guys are talking about, I think I have to read it again. I won't get tired of reading a good book a few times. Old Mu, I'll go with you and read it again. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.